Okay, good afternoon members, officers and any members of the public in the public gallery or viewing this meeting on the live stream. Welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Graham Councillor Cone and I am chairing this meeting. My vice chair is Councillor Stephen Drew, sitting to my right. I will introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. Those in the chamber are reminded that the meeting is being live streamed. By your presence here in the chamber and via video conference, you are deemed to have consented to being filmed and to the use of images and sound recordings for the webcast and archive recording. The normal procedure at Scrutiny and Overview Committee meetings is to review and recommend issues for affirmation, by affirmation. Only those members of the committee present in the chamber will be able to move and second motions or affirm. However, members present virtually may speak in the debate. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their camera and microphone remain off unless they are addressing the committee. For those of us present in the room, please ensure that your microphone is close to you when you speak so we can clearly understand what is being said when you are addressing the room. So, the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Ian, do we have any apologies?
Two apologies, Councillor Martin Khan and Councillor John Williams.
Thanks very much, Ian. We then move on to declarations of interest. Do any members have interest to declare in relation to any item of business on the agenda? And if an interest subsequently becomes apparent later in the meeting, please would you raise it at that point? So, yep, Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just remind the committee that I'm a director, board director of both SCIP, South Cambridgeshire Investment Partnership, and South Cambridgeshire Project.
Thanks very much. Councillor Hogan.
Thank you, Chair. So through this council, I'm a non-executive director of Ermine Street Housing, so I plan to leave just ahead of item 8.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? No? Okay. Okay, so we'll move on. So item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Do members have any suggested amendments relating to the accuracy of the minutes for the meeting held on the 16th of November 2023? Councillor Judith Rippeth.
Yeah, just on page 5 on the Milton Country Park Initiative or the Wild Minds Initiative more generally, it describes it as an event, whereas actually it's like a project or a course. Event gives the idea that it's just a one-off occasion. And I also made the suggestion, which isn't quite reflected here, that contacting upper primary schools, yes, primary schools in the upper years, but also contacting schools in the process initially, because if you contact the GP, the mental health has usually got beyond the point of how that scheme can help. If that can be somehow incorporated, because I think that's what I said.
Okay. Ian, can we have a look at that and incorporate that into the minutes from the last? Sure. Yeah, thank you. Anything else on the minutes that anyone wants to raise? Councillor Ellington.
I just wondered whether there was any progress on the community transport, which is under 6 on page 5, and whether there's any progress on the red button emergency call system, which is on page 6 at the bottom, new digital phone lines. Both of those are important to me at the moment in my parish.
Okay. Councillor Ellison, is that information that you'd requested at the last meeting that we were going to get a written update on? Yes. Yeah, okay. Ian, can I leave it with you to chase up that information for us for the next meeting? Is that okay, Councillor Ellington? Yeah. Anybody else on the minutes? Okay. If there's no other amendments to the minutes, can I take it from the committee that we agree that that's a true reflection of what has happened at the meeting?
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, take that by affirmation. Lovely. So we then move on to public questions, of which we haven't had any. So we will move on to the agenda. So item 5 is the draft 24 to 25 business plan, pages 11 to 34. So can I ask the committee if anyone wants to bring forward questions on this agenda item? Councillor Stobart.
Chair, if you allow me, I have a number of questions, but I could take them in the sections of the business plan, if that would be okay. So if I could start with the growing local businesses part of the plan, and then perhaps you could come back to me later as we move on. So, Chair, the growing local businesses, the plan, the action set out and the progress to date looks very solid. The team has recorded a number of excellent points of performance. But I wondered if underlying this there is a kind of pattern that either we should be following or that we're perhaps recognising and working towards, which is what kinds of business do we support in South Cambridgeshire? And should we be placing emphasis on certain types? I know there's been discussion, for example, of support for green businesses, those that are in the, as it were, sustainability industry. And we often talk about life sciences, but there are lots of little business clusters and they have different needs. Is there a structure to our approach to business which is potentially reflected in this plan or could be, in a sense, added as an overlay to the plan so that our resources are directed well? So perhaps if I could sum up, do we have target businesses or do we have a structure of business that we're addressing through this plan?
Thank you, Councillor Stobart. I'll go to the leader.
Thank you very much. So I'm everybody this evening. Councillor MacDonald, who normally would have taken that question, isn't able to be here. Councillor Williams sends apologies. His house is flooding as we speak. And Councillor Batchelor also is tied up elsewhere. So I'm sorry, you've got me. We've got various other cabinet members online as well available. So the focus of our work has always been on SMEs. And I think that's right and proper. The big businesses are spoilt for choice for membership organisations looking after their best interests, and because they are big businesses, they're actually quite capable of looking after themselves. And so, though we have involvement with the AstraZenecas of this world, but I think we've always felt our responsibility was for the SMEs. Interestingly, I've had a meeting today with Cambridge Clean Tech, who have just been recruited by the combined authority to do some work on what we as a council are going to be, how we see the sort of high tech the high-tech, knowledge-intensive industries future within South Cambridgeshire. So a lot of this stuff we aren't doing alone. So obviously, the Combined Authority have, the overall responsibility for the economic development plan for the Cambridgeshire as a whole. So some of the work we do through them. I feel that our own service, it's important that it's responsive to need and demand. And I wouldn't want to see us restrict ourselves to those nice, glossy, squeaky businesses, because, we need all sorts of business in South Cambs. We are very concerned about the future of pubs. We've lost an awful lot of pubs. That not only are they the source of employment and and an economy, they're absolutely critical to to the social structure and social well-being of our communities. My own village, which is well removed from Cambridge City, has a lot of manufacturing industry. We've got to make sure that we are supporting businesses that provide a wide variety of jobs, and that's not just the high-value jobs. There are people who who are never going to work in these high-tech laboratories, but have every right to good jobs. So I think we have to be very mindful of the different microeconomies that we have in South Cambridgeshire. We aren't one economy, we have microeconomies. Out my neck of the woods, it's quite different from what it is closer to Cambridge. So our responsibility is to make sure that all of them survive well and potentially grow. One of our remits was to stop businesses relocating outside South Cambridgeshire. So back in 2018, we were hemorrhaging businesses elsewhere. And that was one of the reasons for setting up this team and creating a cabinet position, to make sure that businesses that needed to expand, needed new premises, had someone within the council to talk to so that we could help them find premises, preferably in South Cambs, and we didn't keep losing them to Bedfordshire, as was the case then. So I think there's a lot of work we do there. So as I say, I just think we need to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all the businesses within the SME sector.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart, do you want to come back?
Just as a follow-up through you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. So attention to supply chains and what we sometimes refer to as ecosystems. I'm taking it that's a focus. But may I just ask this question: how do we keep up with that? An emerging ecosystem, for example, around. People talk about the software ecosystem in Cambridge, which is quite dispersed and difficult to pin down. How do we identify supply chains and ecosystems that we should be helping, engaging with?
Thank you very much. So thinking back again to 2018 and what the barriers were to economic growth that we identified then, one of those was a lack of awareness of local supply chains. So people could be in a building next door to a web designer, but be going down to Sussex for a web designer. So I think we're establishing a business network. I can't give you detail on that. I'm just having a look to see if there's somebody who can give a more detailed answer online. I'm not sure there is. So I might have to come back to you with the detail on that, but it was certainly one of our priorities about fostering local supply chains. And the team have run quite a lot of webinars and so on. They've run some in-person events, and certainly the little business breakfast events that I've run in my own village are a great space for people to suddenly realise that there's somebody in the village doing web design. So I think whether there's more we should be doing on that, we'll have to ask, but I'll get some more detail from somebody with more knowledge than me.
Thanks very much for that, Leader. Happy with that, Councillor Stobart?
I am, Chair, thank you.
Lovely. Okay, so Councillor Howbray.
Thank you, Chair. So I actually had two questions on the business support section. Is it okay if I tackle them one at a time?
Of course.
Thank you. So the first question is about the overall package of business support. And I just wanted to comment that I feel this is a really impressive and comprehensive package. support for SMEs. And in particular, I'm quite excited to see how the plans are developing for refurbishment of space in the building here. So my question really is on medium-term feedback on this package of support that we're supplying to SMEs, and whether or not we have data back from the businesses that we're supporting on the impact of these different types of support that we're providing, and which of these are really helping the businesses, say, 1 or 2 years down the line. And I'm not talking about, the feedback you get at the end of a seminar that says, yes, that was a great seminar. That's good, but that doesn't tell us about the medium-term impact of what we're doing. So I wondered what kind of data we have on that, whether we're gathering it, whether, any comments on that, really. Thank
So
you.
if we take that first, Leader of the Council.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to ask Anne Ainsworth if she has that information to hand, because I don't. I'm sure Peter MacDonald will be able to talk out for hours about it.
I don't have it to hand, but we do have it. We've got quite a lot of information, both from conversations with businesses anecdotally, but also some of the data that supports it as well. So if you would be happy to receive that after the meeting, we'd be more than happy to provide that to you.
Yes, I'd be very happy with that. Thank you.
Move on to your second.
Yes, so through you, Chair, again, the second question. So the second question was about markets and the section on markets. So we have targets about bringing new markets into the district, which is great. And I'd comment that local markets are a really important way of allowing traders to get to customers, keeping the sort of chain of produce local, but also they're a wonderful way to allow communities to meet in a particular. It provides a context for meeting and for perhaps having stalls for other things alongside the market. And we're in my ward, we're in the unfortunate position of having lost a monthly farmers market recently. So really my question was, do we know about markets that are closing down as well as the markets we're trying to open? And do we have a target for a net increase in the number of markets? And is there anything that perhaps we might be able to do to support markets that are in danger of closing, perhaps if they're viable in the long term but are running into short-term difficulties?
Bridget, in the first instance.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm looking around, and okay, Chair's all the answers. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. We're quite lucky to have Catherine with us this evening, who is our lead on market. So, Catherine, would you like to just update on after that question?
Just as an update.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So as you're aware, you might be aware of the Shared Prosperity Fund, and one strand of that, we do have a project which we're going to be carrying out a market assessment, so that we're looking at the social and economic value that markets bring to South Cambs, and it's a joint project with City. So hopefully, once we have that, we're just about to just finalise the procurement, but once we have that in place, over the next 6 months or so, we should have a report which I think would answer a lot of your questions.
Okay, thank you. So just to come back for a moment, do we have any data on markets closing, and do we have a target for a net increase?
So at the moment, we know that we have around about 20 regular markets. We are working really hard to make sure we don't have any closing down. So there's none on our radar at the moment which are being closed down. We're especially working with Northstowe to ensure that markets that are new to the scene are actually going to survive and flourish.
Okay, I think that mostly answers my question. I'd be very happy to follow up on the details with the officers afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions on different parts.
No problem.
So the first one is under Appendix A on businesses on page 15 on the paper agenda. I think it's the same on the electronic agenda. Under we'll work with partners to support the economically inactive back into work. And on the right-hand side, I wondered whether we could add 3A6 and think about encouraging people to think about childminding, because part of the thing that enables professional adults to get back into work is, you know, because this implies economically inactive. It implies people who have not worked, but actually it could be encouraging people who want to work to enable them to get back into work, because we're offering childminding. So I wondered if we could work with the combined authority skills support people to work towards providing courses to encourage people, younger people probably, into skills supporting childminding. So that's the first one. It's a bit of a vague ask, I grant you, but it links also to housing, which is on page 18 of our agenda. And it's additional requests, so like 2C2 and 2C3. So this is, can we work with new young tenants in new communities to encourage them to think in terms of foster caring? And I'm asking this because in my other capacity as county councillor, I chair the corporate parenting subcommittee, and we would dearly love to have more foster carers available to us within the county network in local communities. For example, we've been looking towards releasing the covenants on tenancies to enable young people to take on foster caring, childcare businesses in our new towns like Northstowe. And that has been a motion to County Council which was carried. But it's also just to encourage young tenants to actually think in terms of childcare in new communities. We've got, I think, one child carer in Northstowe. So it's to encourage new tenants to think in terms of would they like to do childcare, but also have they thought about foster caring? And the third thing is, in housing, is can we bear in mind that in our stock of council homes, you know, we work very much in terms of what the demographic is necessary and what size of houses we need. But one of the things that we find is that we sometimes have existing foster carers who are caring for one child, who would be very happy to care for another child if they had a bigger house. And so I'm just wondering if we can be a bit creative with people who might be existing foster carers in council homes, who might be prepared to take on another child but can't do so because they're in a house with X number of bedrooms. Can we think about working with those tenants to enable them to take on a bigger home so that they could provide a home for another child?
Thank you very much, Councillor Bradman. They're both very important points, and maybe we can have a think about how we might put that into a recommendation into the section of the document on page 18 to see that so at the end of this section we can have that as a specific recommendation. In the first instance, I'll come to the leader of the council, then I know Anne Ainsworth wants to come in on this as well. So, Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you very much. So all important points, but none of which can we do alone. So this is about working with partners. And I think you're chair of the Young People's Committee, Corporate Parenting Committee, which is why you're so knowledgeable about this. So I know we do use the South Cambs magazine to lobby hard for foster carers. I know the Combined Authority is involved through its skills work in increasing the market of people available for early years. And I'm aware that preschools, particularly village preschools, are closing down because they can't get the staff to work there. So, this isn't something that for us to do alone. I think they are all things that we are currently involved in through our partnerships already. Whether it's appropriate to articulate that more clearly or not, I'm quite happy to take away and have a conversation about. On the issue of tenants having bigger houses, that's a bit of a can of worms, I'm afraid, because bigger houses cost more and housing benefit doesn't cover it. And again, I think that's a tricky one. I think certainly there are some serious conversations to be had about when the downstairs of this building is opened up, about childcare provision there, and I'm pretty sure Councillor MacDonald is involved in those conversations, because what we want is equality of access to people running businesses, be they people with caring responsibilities or not. So, all important points, but if Anne Ainsworth could come in and just fill in the gaps, please.
Anne?
Thank you very much, and thank you, Leader. I would just echo all of those points. But just because Northstowe was specifically mentioned as well, and obviously you referenced some of the challenges in Northstowe, I just wanted to mention that one of the issues we had with Northstowe was that in the contracts for the houses that people were purchasing, it said that they couldn't operate businesses from home. Now, we have been working with Homes England, and our planning colleagues have been involved in that as well, to see how that could be changed moving forward, so that will offer that opportunity to people who are interested in that. And as the leaders mentioned, one of the things that the Combined Authority has been looking at with their adult education budget and skills is what are the areas where we could continue to offer training and support for those who might want to retrain or might want to re-enter the job market. So we can definitely take this one back as a specific one that's been mentioned this evening as well. And just one final point as well, I was just speaking with Peter Campbell, and one of the things we can do is put into our tenant magazine around promoting foster caring and give that as a reminder to tenants.
Councillor Bradman?
Thank you. Thank you very much for picking up. I appreciate it's a rather vague, well, specific request, but often these are things that we are not, as a district council, specifically responsible for. So inevitably, it's a call for partnership working. And suffice it to say, I sit on the Combined Authorities Overview and Scrutiny Committee for County Council, and I'm asking the same questions there in terms of skills and development and monies. But as Chair of Corporate Parenting, I'm also asking how can we work with our district councils to encourage and foster new foster carers, because they're so important to us in the county. It would just, if all members can think in terms of, if anybody says they're remotely interested in foster care, please point them in my direction, and indeed the direction of the County Council, because we really need foster carers in this county. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bradman. So I think, that it is a really good recommendation to be working alongside other authorities to best suit the needs of not just the County Council, but people within South Cambs for fostering. And it sounds like the Leader of the Council is happy to discuss that with you offline and come to an agreement on some on that recommendation. Okay. So we'll move over to Councillor Ellington.
Thank you. My point was very similar to Councillor Bradnam in that I was interested in carers as well as childcare, because there's an enormous shortage. And what I wondered whether it was worth including is some linkage with further education. Now, I'm sure that the Combined Authority do that to an extent, but it would be interesting to know how that happens, because if they're not running a course, you can't employ somebody to go on that course, and so it's chicken and egg. The other issue, because I think we've probably covered that quite nicely, is that there's no, under page 15, number 4, we're working to promote. I do wonder whether it's worth including working with the Federation of Small Businesses, as they are definitely focusing on SMEs and are very useful if you are a small business, says she who knows from experience. And if I could just go on to one other point, moving on to page 18, because we have had one question around housing. On page, 18, I'm interested to know whether there is a definition of high quality, because we see it, the words, put in a number of different places. And we talk about producing high quality housing in planning, we talk about producing high quality council housing. Is there a definite definition, or is it just a throwaway phrase, please?
Thank you, Councillor Ellington. I'll come to Councillor Bridget Smith in the first instance.
Thank you very much. So on the carers, so I'm a carer, and because I'm here, I have other carers looking after the person I care for when I'm not doing it. The problem with caring is that it doesn't pay enough, and that's why there's a national shortage of carers. And of course, we've lost an awful lot of people who came from Europe who fulfilled that role here, and now they're not here doing it. So I absolutely agree. There needs to be a national focus on this, and we need to be paying fair wages to people who care, because it's not a very lovely job sometimes. There are elements that are lovely, but there are bits of it that aren't. So, there's a model you might be interested in, Councillor Ellington, is I'm an unremunerated trustee for a little village charity in my own village, which helps self-employed carers link up with people to be cared for, but people who are paid a good wage for doing a good job. So there's a little model there that certainly the county council know all about, because they provided some startup funding for this. But it's something we can go back. I have to declare an interest in this, albeit I'm not paid. But it's something that we can look at further and see if it's a model that works for other communities. It takes a lot of I don't do the volunteering, I'm just a name, but there is a lady who spends considerable time doing all the work on this and helping self-employed carers learn how, what insurance they need to have, what training they need to get, how they do their tax returns and all that sort of thing. So we'll take that forward. I think we already do work with the Federation of Small Businesses frequently. I think we have good relations with them. We've certainly run events with them, and I think those links can continue. And on the definition of high quality housing, I think is Toomey Hawkins online. I think Toomey might. I don't know whether Toomey is best placed or Stephen Kelly, because I imagine we're not just talking about affordable housing here. You're talking about all housing. Does Councillor Hawkins come in?
Councillor Hawkins?
No, she's not
Who's
there.
online?
Perhaps she's just popped out for a bit.
That's right.
Could I ask Stephen Kelly, please?
Just on the other. Yes, Stephen?
Thank you. Sorry. I'll be brief. Well, there's technical standards for high quality homes. So we've got the national space standards in terms of interior room space. There used to be the eco homes standard in terms of categorizations, but of course we're working on measures to reduce the carbon footprint of housing and quantifying that through your sustainability officer. There's also lifetime homes standards in M42 about accessibility. On top of that, I would say there's probably an element to which separate validation, so a number of awards and so on that the council wins for the quality of development are in some way in part recognition of definitions around quality. But I think between the tangible standards, technical standards, and the intangibles about quality of place and so forth, I think it's possible to triangulate and create some view about the quality of new housing being created.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Sue Ellington, did you want to come back on that?
Only just to say that our community warden service in a number of villages do what you're suggesting and keep a collection of people who will provide additional care. And I think that is another big yes for community warden service. Put in a plug. Thank you.
Can I just come back on that as well? And I think, you know, the leader of the council's addressed the things on care very well. And, you know, if there are any further points on that, you can address that outside of the meeting. But the point on small business federation, were you saying that there should be reference to that within the business plan as a recommendation, or are you happy that it's being done and not cited?
I think reference to it would be useful because it spreads, it publicises the organisation that will help small businesses. And I also note, as Councillor Bradnam said, that I've received information about the County Council supporting any carer who wants to set up in business on their own to help them go through the process of doing that.
So officers are nodding and seemingly happy to take that forward. Yeah, lovely. Okay, so if you're happy, we'll move on. Councillor Helen Lehman, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a suggestion for something additional to be added to the business plan, please. It's in the Modern and Caring Council section, page 29.5. The heading is, we will work with communities and individuals to tackle issues that are affecting them locally. This is a fairly recent thing, but there's a new project group being set up in Camborne called Camborne 25. The purpose of this is to deliver a series of projects which will improve the quality of life for residents, tackle some historical issues that have arisen as the town's being built and expanded. And the sorts of things that it would include would be things like active travel, community development, wellbeing, infrastructure. It's going to involve county, district and town councillors. I just thought it would be helpful if it could be included in this section with, you know, as a KPI that we can monitor against and scrutinise progress on deliverables.
Okay. Councillor Bridget Smith.
So I don't see any reason why it can't be included in the business plan. Whether that can translate into a KPI, you know, there have to be measurable things, but I don't see any reason. I'm looking at the Chief Executive. Why that can't be in the business plan? You know, because actually what it means then is it's an established model that, you know, could well work in other communities, but is being trialled in Camborne. So,
Chief Executive.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So, although the business plan there aren't always KPIs attached to all parts of it, we do bring the business plan regularly to Scrutiny and Cabinet, and it is monitored. So, absolutely happy to include Camborne 25, as you suggest, Councillor Leeming. Thank you.
Any follow-up on that, Councillor Leeming?
No, that's great. I just think it would help to sort of publicise our work and keep an eye on what we're doing, keep us focused on delivering.
Brilliant. So sounds like that's a recommendation that will be taken forward. Lovely. So if we come to Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start off with something that I think the leader will be pleased about, in that I had a resident contact me who'd read the business plan. I know it's a frustration sometimes of us as councillors that we sit and scrutinise documents that people then don't go on to see. But one of the things that they were slightly confused about in the style and made me think about accessibility. If I take you to page 13, it starts with the output achievements and then latest outcome information. And then some of the figures, it obviously says objective 1, which is, we understand, is the objectives that then follow. but it might be helpful to have the titles in there with it, because it then goes on to speak about 22 data or 2005, and they were a bit confused as to what that represented, which when we went through, you can match it up, but we're very used to looking and accessing these documents. So that might be something that you might want to look at to see if there's some explanatory or notes or something that can go with that to make it more accessible. But good news that people are actually reading the documents that we're going through. The other question I just had was from page 14, 1DI, about space rented out to startups and small businesses. Now, this is something that obviously lots of people want to support, and it's a really great aim, but there are some sort of we need some safeguards in place, sort of to do with security, but also reputational risks. How do we stop, for example, a company that's benefiting from potentially, in this current climate, money and investment from a Russian company, perhaps? Or how do we ensure that our policies are robust to make sure that if somebody wanted to set up something that we would deem inappropriate to be functioning from the council, those sorts of things, and I'm thinking particularly from sort of a tax and fraud point of view. We know that some people, I think people have actually registered the council building as their registered address at Company's House wrongly, which is very easy at the moment to identify. But how do we have those safeguards in place going forward?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you very much. So on your first point, very happy to review the accessibility of the information presented here. Delighted that members of the public are taking the trouble to read this. It is a really good document, and I think we've made massive improvements in how accessible the information in it is, but happy to take that forward. So I know we've thought long and hard about the risk of unscrupulous or undesirable bodies using our facilities, and I'm going to come to Anne Ainsworth, who I think might have a bit more detail on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this point, because it is something quite pertinent and something that we've been keeping in mind as well with regards to this. So at the moment we've got a couple of thoughts on how we would try to prevent anything of the nature of which you've described. So we're going to have a booking in system, we're going to be asking for ID and information from individuals, and we're also going to be looking at their business details as well. We're expecting that quite a lot of the businesses who would initially at least want to use that space would be kind of one-man bands, very small type of businesses, and that's certainly the businesses we will be looking to target. But you're quite right, we need to make sure obviously that there's reputational issues, etc., for the council, and do everything that we can to ensure that no one is using the business address of these offices in a way that would be inappropriate. Very happy for any members, if you have any further suggestions about what potentially we should be looking at, very happy to receive those suggestions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Did you want to come back on that at all, Councillor Williams?
No, I will just take Anne up on her offer. Particularly, obviously from HMRC and the Ford side, there's quite a few safeguards that we could probably help with.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. So I had a number of questions, comments throughout the rest of the business plan, but could I just take three of them, and I'll go through each one in turn rather than reading the whole list. So page 18, and that's item 3B, and then its consequent 3B1. So this is talking about the works to improve energy efficiency of our council housing properties, and then the associated action is improve all council properties below a C EPC rating, etc. I'm wondering how this gets done. Perhaps it's a detail below, which we're not going to go down to, but I wonder if wrapped up in this action are things like, could we do this kind of work or build the capability at the council to do work of this nature, and could it be connected, whether it's done at the council or not, with apprenticeships and skills programs in this area, because these are needed vital skills around insulating properties, dropping in heat pumps, adapting to older housing stock, which also need to be modelled in order to identify the right approach. So are we seizing this opportunity? That's my first question. Second, if I could just go to...
Did you want to... we might take them in turn, if that's okay, Councillor Stobart.
Yeah,
and,
yes.
Just
I'll keep
so
it to
we
three.
Can keep,
Yeah.
Okay, so before I bring in Peter Campbell for the detail of this, my understanding is that we do condition surveys on all our houses, and then we don't deal with this internally, but Peter will be able to give you the detail of that. You may be interested that I spent yesterday at Westminster giving evidence to the Energy Audit Committee, where there was, you can watch it online if you want, where there was a long debate about this upskilling of the workforce. And there were, on the session before I was on, there was a chap, obviously quite senior within the heat pump industry, talking about taking all these gas engineers and upskilling them to begin to install heat pumps and so on. So again, I'm pretty sure that all the companies we work with, we check them out for their own environmental credentials and for, and for their use of apprentices and so on. So I think that's happening, even though it's not under our direct control. But I'm sure, if I may bring in Peter, please, for the detail.
Sorry, my name is a bit strange then. As Councillor says, exactly right. So we're just approaching the end of a project to carry out stock condition surveys in all our properties. So we'll have very good information on the energy performance rating of each property, the condition, and that will give us a strong indication of what work needs to be done to bring everything up to an EPC C or above, which is largely going to be, we suspect, about insulation with some heating upgrades, but mainly focusing on insulation. So what we will do is that we'll use the information from the stock conditions survey to produce a costed business plan, and that will report it to members, of course, on the progress. So this will be very, very visible. With regards to the skills, we are aware this is a very live issue, and it's something which Board has been dealing with quite recently. So, can I pass it on to Board to make some more comments?
Thank you, Peter. Apart from the issue with our own estates, we also have a large demand in terms of the wider public, and we see the same challenges in terms of not having enough of supply to meet the demand for retrofitting. And we are working with our colleagues in Cambridge City Council to see how we can address that gap. But there's not much else we can say for now. But yeah, we've identified the need, and we're going to look at a few options to see how we can plug that gap by increasing the supply to the market.
Thank you for that. I think that addresses the point. So do you want to move on to your next?
My next one, yeah. So page 20, item 5CV, so East-West Rail. And I just want to reflect on a recent meeting of the East-West Mainline Partnership, which is a cluster of local authorities all along the route from, in fact, beyond Oxford, all the way well into East Anglia. Of course, we have the particular focus in South Cambridgeshire because the line runs through South Cambridgeshire. So I won't go beyond that because that's been debated elsewhere. But the emphasis in the action is on mitigation, whereas I think and understanding the discussion, there are opportunities to be had. Now, some of the communities in South Cambridgeshire are are quite affected by the choice of the route. But on the other hand, the tenor of the discussion, and particularly as it was facilitated by the East-West Mainline Partnership, of which we're members, was more on the opportunity. So, for example, we were talking about through ticketing, and that led to the possible advantages of ticketing with, for example, a franchised bus operation. So I don't want to sort of go down into any of those details, but to say, actually there are opportunities, and working alongside colleagues from other local authorities represented in the East-West Mainline Partnership would be very advantageous to us. So it's really to say, in this process, we should be working alongside others, who have dealt with some of these issues of a new railway line, an upgraded railway line, and look for the opportunities and connect them with other things, some of the other transport initiatives. So I know this is a delicate area, but I think the emphasis ought to be on the opportunity as much as the mitigation, and that would imply a change in the kind of tenor of that paragraph.
Okay, Councillor Bridget Smith.
So I think 5CV does actually say to ensure the district benefits from improved accessibility. I think what we're not making clear here is that we are very actively engaged with any number of partners, directly with East West Rail, also through the county, very much through the county council, and Brian Milnes can probably add some beef to that, but also very much through the combined authority as well and their powers for franchising. So we are a part of an important partnership. We're obviously also members of the Oxford-Cambridge Pan-Regional Partnership, which has England's economic heartland, which is the strategic transport body for most of the East-West Rail line, heavily involved in it. So I think we are in there with them. And I think if I could take away take away what you're saying about that not being clear here. So I don't think we are just talking about the mitigation is much more about the line, but there are clear benefits, which is why the Liberal Democratic administration has been strongly supportive of the principle of an East-West rail link, because we absolutely know that it comes with a huge load of benefits. Though for some people, there are negatives, but I don't know if Brian might.
I think that probably addresses the points of engagement and so forth. So I think we'll leave it at that. And if you come on to your next point, Councillor Stobart.
Sorry, my third and final, and this was page 20. Just bear with me. Sorry. Sorry, Chair, I've lost my place.
That's okay.
Under a modern caring council. No, look at the paper one. No. Yes, here we go. So I'm on page 29. Sorry.
Page 29, yeah.
And 5B1, develop and implement a plan to increase support for arts and culture projects. Where does this sit with our arts and culture strategy? We did have a go at this, and I just wonder if this point is maybe even a little bit out of context, given that we had the discussion about arts and culture. We didn't quite bottom that one out. There's such a lot of potential, the crossover, for example, into sustainability and environment and youth engagement through an arts and culture strategy. So could we just kind of give this a home and see, perhaps working backwards, there is an arts and culture strategy we can pin down.
Okay, Councillor Bridget Smith.
So we don't have a strategy. And it's because, this has been very much on hold because we've been dealing with pandemics, cost of living crisis, others, there's been a lot of other stuff which has, you know, non-statutory stuff that we've had to be focusing on delivering. So this is non-statutory, and it's about having capacity within our system to do it. And whilst it's undoubtedly a nice to have, you know, that thus far we haven't moved it forward. However, this is progress that is featuring here. So, you know, we're the only district that wraps all the way around another district. And of course, Cambridge itself is very much a focus for arts and culture. So, you know, a lot of people living in South Cambridge will get their arts and culture from Cambridge City. You know, that's a reality, and Cambridge City, you know, will do it better than we can ever do it. We do have community chest grants, which, you know, can be allocated to, you know, to local village-based projects, and we're always happy to do that. You might be interested that the mayor has set aside some funding for arts and culture as well, so it's something that he's very involved in. So, you know, where I think we need to go with this is to start liaising with the combined authority to see if you know, there's a role for us in delivering on the mayor's ambitions on this, rather than us who aren't going to, you know, we're not going to be able to resource this well enough to do, I was going to say a big song and dance about it, which is rather appropriate for arts and culture. But, you know, we can do a little well. We probably can't do a lot well, which is why I think we need to be talking to the mayor about his ambitions.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Stobar.
Through you, Chair, to the leader. There is grant. You mentioned the community chest grant, and so a community might step forward and say, well, we want to do some, I don't know, development of a sustainability story with our young people. That would be quite legitimately supported by community chest grants, and that might be something we could communicate. Is some of those solid, for examples, so that people will be encouraged to apply.
Brilliant. Okay, Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. And also S106s for new developments also include arts elements to them. And again, I think we, you know, possibly need to make people more aware of that. When I arrived at this council 16 years ago, there was a dedicated arts officer, and there was considerable budget for it. And it was lovely because I was running a little charity, had a whole load of it, and did some. You know, I used to run an annual Battle of the Bands, largely funded by South Cambridgeshire District Council, which were great. But I think we need to be. You know, we're living in a slightly different world now. So, you know, the fact this is in here means that, you know, we're probably looking for some willing souls to identify what our role is and what we could do well.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. I've got a few more speakers and then we'll try and draw to a close. So if I come to Councillor Hobro.
Thank you, Chair. I had two questions on housing and one on Green to the Core, if that's acceptable. Okay. So the first question on housing was about the rate of council house building. So this is page 18, section 1. And we have a top-level objective for the number of new council houses that we're building over in the 5-year period. So really my question was, and I didn't see this in the report, of course, presumably some council houses are also being sold in that period. So do we have, or should we have, an objective for the net increase? I couldn't see the net increase anywhere in this report. So I wanted to check that this does represent a net increase, which I'm pretty sure it does. And if so, what is the net increase, and perhaps suggest that it should be included.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you very much. I'll bring in Peter Campbell for the detail there, but it is an increase. You know, we don't sell that many houses a year, and of course it varies how many houses we sell. But if I may refer to Peter, thank you.
Yeah, Peter.
Yes, councillors may recall that the numbers, we have reported on the numbers of properties sold and the net increase. That was in the asset management strategy, which members agreed last year. I'm very happy to give up-to-date figures on that. I'll provide them outside the meeting. The difficulty is providing net increase as a target, is that it's not a specifically smart target The number of sales, of course, is something which is outside our control and can be affected by things like government policy, interest rates, etc. So I would rather not have that as a target.
Councillor Howbray.
So thank you, Chair. I understand the difficulty, and I think my main request really is to make sure the numbers are clearly in the report for the net, given the difficulties in having it as a target. Because perhaps I didn't look hard enough, but I couldn't see the net in there.
Okay, if you...
Sorry, certainly, we can provide that information.
Yeah, we move. If you come on to your other 2 points.
So my second question was about empty homes, which is, I've forgotten, page 20, the bottom page 20. So it says that there's a target for 40 empty homes to be brought back into use. And then at the top of the section, it mentions that there are 1,300 empty homes, including 300 second homes. So presumably that means 1,000 empty homes that are not second homes, that are, this is what I sort of think of as the truly empty homes, the buildings that are not being used. So where does the 40 come from in the context of the 1,000? And how does that sort of fit in with our longer term objective to move towards reducing that number?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. May I bring in Peter there for the detail of that figure?
Peter Campbell. So Bode, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, actually empty homes falls under Bode's remit, so
of course. Bode, feel free to come in.
Thank you, Chair. The figure of 40 is an initial target. This is a new post, and the officer has only just been imposed. In fact, it was a temporary post. We're now seeking to make it permanent. So this is an initial target, and it reflects the amount of effort that we need to go through to bring one single home back into practical use. We've already almost achieved about 10, 15, I think we're setting a target of 20. So once that's done, we'll have a better idea of how realistic targets can be.
Thanks very much. Next point.
So thank you, that was a very comprehensive answer, thank you very much. So my third question was about the green to the core section. So it's about page 22. And really my question is about, it did strike me that there's not much here about transport, which is one of our big areas of carbon emission in here. There are 1 or 2 areas where it does feature. In particular, there's a section on electric vehicles, although I think the electric vehicles section refers to electric cars. And my understanding is that electric bicycles are rather more effective at reducing our carbon emissions. So I suppose my question is whether or not, and this is rather a vague question, I'm not necessarily expecting a comprehensive answer now, but a suggestion really. Are there any other ways that we could fit the changes related to our transport emissions into this section? Because it seems to me that it doesn't feature very much other than indirectly through the zero carbon grants, which are often used for transport type projects.
Councillor Bridget Smith. I assume that's a sort of recommendation to bolster that essentially, yeah.
So you're probably going to get a rather woolly answer to this. The problem is that there's very little that's within our control. This is all being done, well, through GCP, obviously, which is probably where we have the greatest influence, but also with the combined authority and through the county council. So for those people who were at the nice environmental event that was run recently, we heard from a very small parish council how they'd used one of their zero carbon grant to put in 2 EV charging points within a village on a little bit of parking space, because they were aware that there was a lot of houses without off-road parking themselves. So, that's where our direct influence is it responding to communities with an ambition to help themselves, and I think that's where our strength lies. The rest of the decarbonising the transport system, is we have to be working with our partners in order to deliver on that. But then again, we've had a conversation about East West Rail. That's part of it. Whether we can do more on electric bikes and supporting electric bikes, can I take that away, please? And we'll have a think about that.
Thank you.
So thank you. I mean, I appreciate that it's a very difficult question to answer specifically. I really wanted to make sure that we're keeping a focus on looking for ways in which we might be able to help indirectly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Bygott.
Thank you. So my question is on Green to the Core, page 11. In the section 4, we will decarbonise the council's estate in operations. So in the centre column under 4A, procure low emissions vehicles or alternative fuels, e.g. biofuel, as replacements for our existing fleet. And then under that we have 4B, where we talk about the electric vehicle charging at the Waterbeach depot. But in the third column, under 4A1, it says deployment of at least 20% alternative fuels as a proportion of total fuel usage by refuse fleet. So we talk about low emissions vehicles or alternative fuels in the middle. We only talk about alternative fuels on the right. So my question is, where do electric vehicles fit into that, given the commitment we've got below with the recharging? Do we have any plans to procure any further electric vehicles, and is that something that we're still committed to? Thank you.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you very much. So this is something I was talking about in Westminster yesterday. So I'll bring Bode in for details. So my understanding is that we're about to take delivery of our 4th electric bin vehicle, and that will max us out on the grid supply. All right? So and it will take 10 years, you know, if we are to rely on UKPN to give us the increase in the grid supply, which is why we have acquired a substantial grant from the Combined Authority to put in our own solar array and battery storage in order to allow us to acquire more electric bin lorries. All right? So currently we are curtailed by the capacity of the grid to support more. Just, Bode, is there anything else I should have said, please?
Yeah, I think that was 100% complete. I think just to say, we already have the capital fully allocated for the purchase of electric vehicles. I think up to about 18 vehicles between us and Cambridge City Council. But once we get the 4th vehicle this year, we can't take delivery of any more until we've completed the Waterbeach solar project. But we have capital allocated aside to begin to buy them once we have the supply established.
Thanks very much. Okay. Did you want to follow up at all?
Yeah, so it says 4B3, REN Commission and Operational Q2. So does that mean that we're assuming that any further electric vehicles will come not in this coming budget year, but in the budget year after?
I think that's probably correct. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Councillor Judith Rippeth, I think, is our last speaker on this.
Thank you. We're going back to page 29 on the paper copy and back to the Arts and Culture Projects plan. And I'm really pleased to see this in here. I understand that obviously with a number of villages it's harder and the community chest grants are often appropriate, but something I'd like to recommend and ask if this could be included to help with sort of strategizing it and perhaps reintroducing an officer, because I think this is an important thing to invest in, is to focus it around our new towns, because arts and culture is actually essential for helping to boost the community basis where you were starting with a brand new community. Like in Waterbeach, I can count the people on the fingers of both hands at the minute, but soon those numbers will increase. And a building like a theatre, I think that could really be a long-term sort of selling point of the council. And I think I would like to suggest that as a focus for the plan, to be on those new towns, because that is, you know, the future as well of this area. Just on the new towns, or as a... Mainly on the new towns as a way of getting it going. Yeah. Because I think that's so important to, as Councillor Leeming has referenced, about, you know, avoiding difficulties as well, and trying to ensure that your new communities flourish. And there will be lots of people there.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. I'd like to bring in Councillor Handley, but actually I think it's an excellent idea, actually, of how to focus a new work stream. And I think it might be a very good way of levering in some money from the combined authority. So I think it's an excellent idea, because, you know, the arts are what bring people together, and in new communities, you know, where we are heavily invested in community development. You're quite right. So, but I mean, Councillor Handley might well have thought about this.
Councillor Handley, did you briefly want to come in on Councillor Rippeth's recommendation?
It's noted. Sorry. Yes, noted. I will speak again with communities, the communities team. It does, as Councillor Bridget Smith says, the leader says, it is an excellent idea, and we will see how we might get towards that goal.
So, can I assume from that you'll work with Councillor Rippeth after the meeting to work towards that recommendation?
Yeah, thank
Yes.
you. Anything, I think, which can get that ball rolling and do that would be really, really good.
And like the other recommendations, that Ian's taken notes of those as part of the report. So,
and there's Section 106 money, if that could in some way help.
Okay, thank you. So, I think if no one's got anything else to add, we better go to page 33 of the agenda papers and just look at the recommendations on there at point 4. Given that we've made a number of recommendations that will be minuted and noted, and the leader of the council has taken those forward, I think, can we approve those recommendations by affirmation? Is that agreed? Yeah, that we've noted a number of things. Lovely to take forward. Okay, so we'll move on to the next agenda item. Just give me a minute to get to the right page. So we're going to move on to agenda item 6, which is the draft budget, pages 35 to 102. I think it might be best to work through the appendix in turn. So there's 7 of those. So if we start with appendix 1, which is on page 37, who would like to speak first? Councillor Leeming?
Thank you, Chair. I actually have a question about paragraph 13 on page 34, which is in the introduction to the appendices. I think this is to do with methods of cross-charging support services, but I wasn't quite clear what it actually meant and what the scale of this sort of different treatments of various service allocations actually would cost. It's just not a very clear paragraph, and I thought it could be helpful if it could be expanded on in some way.
Thank you for that. Did we want to bring in?
I think we better bring in Peter. That's a very technical question.
Yeah, Peter.
Yeah. So there was in the past a requirement to charge all of those services that are regarded as a support service to the services that they support, as the name suggests. So an example of the support service would be our accountancy function, our HR function. And there was a requirement to fully recharge all of those costs right down to the lowest service level. So, for example, accountancy would make a charge to all of the codes within planning, homelessness within housing, environmental health, taxi licensing within environmental health. That requirement was removed a number of years ago, and although we haven't changed the way we do it, so we've still been following that, this year we took the decision to simplify things and not charge down to the lowest level. So we need to charge our support services to our housing revenue account because that's obviously a separate account to our general fund. So we are still charging accountancy and those sort of services to the housing revenue account, and we still need to charge an amount to our general fund, but not down to the individual service level. So it's a simplification of the allocation of the support charges, but there is still a requirement to charge it to particular areas, such as the housing revenue account, our companies such as Ermine Street, shared services and things like that. I think it's fair to say the process that we've carried out this year was perhaps not quite as easy as we thought it was going to be, so we will review the way we've done the budgets this year. But essentially, it's because we don't have to do it, it seems more appropriate to do it in a way that is perhaps a little bit more transparent, I think. So you get your total HRA cost of support.
Councillor Lehman?
Thank you. I understand that the bottom line will remain the same. It's the analysis
Yes.
at a particular level within these figures. When we're looking at these budget figures and all the appendices, are we comparing like with like? Have these cross charges been taken out of both years?
So we haven't gone through. Yeah. So we haven't gone back and stripped the costs out of the actual figures and the original budget.
When we look at the actuals for the prior years, they will include this internal cross charging, but the budget going forward will not.
So yeah, in the original estimate and the previous year, we've still got the figures in based on the previous. So you're not comparing exactly like with like.
That makes sense.
But it is actually quite a lot of work to go back.
I understand. Thank you. When I read that paragraph, I was trying to understand the scale of what it would be in each budget line.
But you're right, the bottom line.
The bottom line is, in terms of what is the cost of the council, will exactly be the same.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for highlighting that. Any more speakers on Appendix 1? Councillor Stover.
Not strictly Appendix 1, Chair.
Okay.
But I did want to take this opportunity, maybe we come back to it later, but I was thinking about how we take slices through all of these, if you will, departmental budgets to come up with, for example, what is the council spending on professional and staff development, for example, because it's distributed through all of these budgets, but it's a question that you might want to ask in relation to just how do we compare with other similar councils in our staff training budget. And I would say you wouldn't need to do this for everything, but for example, youth engagement, pops up in a number of the different kind of budget departments, if you will. But is this feasible? Is it necessary? I think it would be very helpful to have some of this, these figures, but perhaps it would take some work. But I just want to ask the question: could we take a slice? Okay. For certain key things that we might want to discuss openly and compare. Yeah.
I'll go to Peter for that one.
So on page 44, the appendix 1, you'll see something called our subjective analysis, and that's provided, and that's a summary, but that's the sort of type of expenditure. So within employee expenses, for example, there is the staff development and training type costs within there. Now, we have the ability to drill down and get to those costs for each individual cost centre for that type of expenditure. So we do have that information. I think you referred to professional. Sorry, remind me what the...
Well, there were two topics that I thought of as good examples through you, Chair. The first was, professional staff training. and the second was youth engagement.
Okay.
Just two examples.
Yeah, so with something like staff training, it would take some work to actually drill down and get what you would class as professional training as opposed to other training. Whereas obviously our budgets just pick on training generally, so we probably wouldn't have that detail. Although, it could probably be obtained with a little bit of work. With youth engagement, you're right, there's a number of initiatives that are being carried out across each of the budgets. So, for example, there's work going on within the planning department, and we have that's fully funded by external developers. And I know there's a programme, and Stephen may want to talk a bit more about that, but I know that they operate a programme there of youth engagement. And obviously we have a number of apprentices across the council. I know they're slightly different, and I think there's a lot of other things planned in various other areas in relation to youth engagement. And I guess that's in response to the Task and Finish group that finished last calendar year, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. So it sounds like we can source the information. It would be some work, but it could be sourced or broken down further from the summary on page 44 to include things like you suggest.
Sure. I think I was interested in the accessibility of that data.
Yeah,
I think it's important.
Okay.
And I think the answer is more or less yes, we can do it.
Yeah. Okay. Any other points on appendix? Sorry, Councillor Smith, did you want to come in on that?
Well, all I want to say was, we've worked, Peter and his team have worked really hard to, improve the presentation of these accounts. It wasn't that many years ago they were impenetrable to people like me. I know the accountants in the room will have battled their way through them. But we've already heard today that members of the public do look at the stuff that we publish, and I think it's really important that we obviously fulfil our statutory obligations to present our accounts in the way that is required, while not overcomplicating them. But the important thing is, and picking up on Councillor Stobart's point, that this detail is available should people want it. But for me, less is more, and I'm really pleased with the way these have been presented, because I understand them. And if I understand them, then I imagine most other people understand them as well in this format.
Thank you for that. Did you want to come in on this point, Councillor Bradman?
On that point, whilst Councillor Stobart often makes really valid points, I actually don't agree with his request for detail on this. I think if he wants to ask for this, that's one thing. But our officers work very hard, as the leader has said, to produce this data. And I just think that what we're receiving for the purposes of this committee is fine, and I don't think we need the extra detail.
Thank you for those comments, and I think that would lead me to say the data is available. We could source it if we needed it for projects and things like that on request from what's been said. So I think that answers the question in that it's there and we can access it if required. Yes, Councillor Drew.
Yes, we are there. Thank you very much. If I can go to page 48. Just looking at the information provided in relation to the food safety and water quality and the health and safety at work lines. I'm not doubting the efficacy of the data in the grey box, for instance, or the blue or the yellow box or whatever. I just wondered, looking through the table, what perhaps explanation we can have in relation to the fact that there is a very significant difference in the original estimate and the probable outturn in both cases for the food safety and water quality and health and safety at work. Now, it's a positive that obviously not as much expenditure was required. But I'm always conscious of the fact that when a budget is being presented to ourselves, a Scrutiny overview, or any other body who are responsible for things, that obviously we are taking the information we receive as the original estimate to be a very clear and professional assessment of where things are. And if I look at the food safety and water quality, we are clearly saying here that there's £150,000 less expenditure. and for the health and safety at work, we have £80,000 less expenditure. Now, fortunately, in both cases, that goes onwards. So I suppose what I'm getting at is, in these two cases, we have a significant difference between the original estimate and the probable outturn. Could I have some explanation as to why that has happened and whether or not we can expect to see a similar situation when the 24-25 box moves into the current location of 23-24? And if we can expect to see that, is that a problem? Should we be concerned about the validity of the financial planning that is going on?
Councillor Bridget Smith in the first instance.
Yeah, it will be in the first instance.
Yeah.
So I suspect it's because this is in part a demand-led service, but I don't know whether. But so is it Baudet or Pete?
Yeah. Baudet, I think. Baudet, did you?
Baudet and then yeah. Peter, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I think exactly that. It's demand-led. I'm trying to see if David Hill is here as well. To give an example, 2 years ago, we had an incident near Duxford, PFAS. We had water pollution in the aquifer. So that would have influenced our budgeting for the following year. So it seems that that incident hasn't had as much of a demand as we predicted. It's now been taken over by the Environment Agency. Also, when it comes to food safety, it's very difficult to predict incidents that happen. So what we tend to do is slightly over budget based on what happened the previous year, and we try and stay within budget. So that's worked in our favor in these two cases. But it's pretty much demand-led, and it's almost impossible to predict what's going to happen in these two areas.
Peter Mannix, did you want to come in?
So there's probably two factors at work here. Exactly the factor that Baudet mentioned, but also the factor that we referred to earlier, or that Councillor Leeming raised. So the allocation of support charges are not showing on these budgets anymore, whereas they previously were. So there'll be a number of budgets in here where the figures have gone down because the support charges are not now charged to that low level.
Okay. Councillor Drew.
So, taking completely what Bodhi said in terms of the demand-led element of it, but coming back to what Peter said there. So, if the change in the way in which the accounting is done for these things is part of the cause of the lowering of the outturn, that, as far as I understand it from your answer to Councillor Leeming of what you said there, is a specific thing in the 23-24 section, and we wouldn't expect to see that being relevant to the 24-25 section because there will have been no change in the way it's been calculated from the start of the year to the end.
So just to come back, so within the 23-24 probable figure and the 24-25 figure, so those two will have had the support charges removed, whereas the original and the actual figure, the support charges are still in there, which will be why the higher figures are reported in the first two columns and then the lower figures later on, because the revised and next year's figure don't include the support charges charged to that level.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on Appendix 1 or 2? Councillor Bradnam first, and then I'll come to Councillor Stobart.
Thank you. It's a sort of similar question to the one raised by Councillor Drew. It's on page 49 under licensing, and I'm slightly up as chair of licensing. I'm sort of possibly aware of what's going on here, but I'm asking about the original estimate for costs for licensing in 2023-24, and then the probable of 127,000, and then the probable outturn of 6,000, which is an even bigger change. And I'm not quite sure why that's dropped. I mean, there's narrative, but I'm not quite sure I understand it. I was wondering if somebody could explain that.
Shall I come to Peter?
Well, I don't either, so I'm going to have to go to Peter.
Peter Maddox. Yeah, that's okay.
I'm quite happy to take an answer outside the meeting.
Yeah, it looks as if we've moved some of the staffing allocations away from there into other budgets, but should we,
yes,
if it's okay with
That sounds
we'll
sensible,
do a
I think,
detailed
yeah.
look and see what exactly that.
Thank you. Happy with that, Councillor Bradman? Yeah.
yes, that's
Lovely.
fine, thank you.
Councillor Stobart?
Chair, thank you. So I'm looking at page 47 and Zero Carbon Communities scheme, but my question is more general. So in this whole area of climate, environment and waste, and in fact it could be applied to other areas of the council's activity, we've often talked about the importance of data collection, you know, looking at the opportunities and also designing in as you know, opportunity permits or as budget permits, the collection of data from new schemes and new procedures. So I just wanted to hear, you know, what across perhaps this domain, and it's a very general sort of question, what are we allocating and what's perhaps the budget implication of gathering more data and then managing it and presenting it? Because, you know, in this area, evidence and very hard evidence is actually crucial and important for propelling technologies and designs forward. So there's my question. What are we allowing for data collection across this piece in the budgets?
Thank you very much, Councillor Stobart. I'll come to Councillor Bridget Smith in the first instance. I know Councillor Batchelor also wants to come in here.
Thank you, and I'm going to speak for a second and then refer it back to the Chief Executive. So, it's a really good question, and you might recall that one of the recommendations within the corporate peer review was about using data better, and in fact we asked for that. You know, we're very aware that as a local authority, we, like all others, produce vast quantities of data, but the question is, do we then use it well? So I know Liz has established a specialist data team within the organisation, whether they're going to be doing specifically what you're asking about, but I think you might well be interested in what, you know, how that team is going to improve our analysis and our use and our collection of data.
If I come to Councillor Batchelor first, online, and then I'll come to the Chief Executive.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was actually going to answer the previous question about the licensing budget, but so if Liz wants to go first, I can have a quick stab at that one afterwards, if that's okay.
No problem. Yeah, you go on this question.
Thank you. So on the data team, we haven't established them yet. They're in the budget, so we've got some money in the budget to start from the 1st of April. So we'll need to recruit. And, you know, I think there's a huge amount of data in this organisation, and so we're going to need to focus where we sort of put our resources initially, but I think we'd be happy to be led by members if you think there are specific areas where data analysis could add value. We'd be more than happy to have those conversations with you.
Okay, yeah, lovely. Councillor Stobart, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you through you, Chair, both the Chief Executive and Leader for that general comment. Could I just pick up on, and I'm just going to make it related, page 54, under the budget item, I won't find it, noise nuisance control. Yeah. So historically this has been you know, associated with big noises, machinery, parties, you know, things that, you know, noisy neighbours, things that cause real nuisance. But I'm wondering, you know, and have we seen, and perhaps it's even allowed for in the budget, the kind of noise, that grating noise that, you know, is said, you know, by health professionals to be affecting people's mental health. So if they live in a noisy corner of a village or a city. And this is probably the kind of thing that if you start to cluster complaints and the data that's resulting, you know, from the analysis following those complaints, you can begin to look at, you know, are there particular hotspots? So I suppose I'm combining two things, but you know, have we allowed for this kind of more serious kind of effect of noise? And perhaps I could add the rider question: how would our proposed data approach, perhaps it's too early to ask the question, but I'll put it, would support drawing down key conclusions from that kind of data?
Thank you. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. I think Councillor Batchelor would probably like to pick that one up as well. But I'll just say that I'm not aware, I'm aware that this is an issue in some places, and there was an item on Radio 4 quite recently about it. I'm not aware that it's an issue here. We have had in the past issues over noise from wind farms, which have taken some of our resources. Again, this is another of these demand-led services, but I defer to Councillor Batchelor.
Okay, so Councillor Batchelor, did you want to touch on the noise thing first, and then we'll come back to the licensing thing after that?
Sure, yeah. So as mentioned, noise nuisance control is a demand-led service. So it's investigated once a complaint comes in, and there are a variety of different things or different noise sources that are being complained about. Everything from neighbours up to the new flight path from Luton Airport, for example. So it's a wide-reaching service, and one that we sort of try and do our best to to address. But so the larger problems, like for example the Luton flight path, isn't something we have any power to do anything about. We can lobby those that are making the noise, but we don't have any power to enforce. Whereas sort of smaller residential issues we do. So very briefly, jumping back to the question about the difference in numbers of licensing. So the licensing column and the taxi license column, they're part of essentially the same department. What we had partway through last year was a huge influx of applications for taxi licenses. So we essentially had to reallocate staff from the licensing team, who are all multi-skilled, to predominantly process taxi license applications. Hence why there's actually a profit in the taxi license budget and a bit of an underspend in the licensing column. So yeah, I hope that's answered the second question and part answered the first.
I'm happy to have a conversation with Councillor Batchelor afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we move on to, sorry, Councillor Stoback, did you want to come back at all? Did you?
Could I just ask one small question, also in this section on flood defences, page 55?
Yeah.
And this more general question about the longer term. Are we beginning to see already, and are we anticipating in the longer term a higher budget for flood defence, given the effects of climate change, more peaky rainfall conditions, and, for example, increased costs of pumping? And a somewhat naive question about how we interact with internal drainage boards, whether there are financial implications around that too.
So shall I bring Councillor Henry Batchelor in again for this one? Henry, could you have a go at that one?
Yeah, sure. So you'll probably see from this year the expenditure we're predicting to be less than the current financial year. The budget predominantly revolves around the management of our awarded water courses, as that, in terms of flooding, that is the main sort of source of, or the main sort of thrust of where the majority of the budget goes. Obviously, the large portion of flooding in Cambridgeshire is the responsibility of the lead local flood authority, who sit within the county council's remit. But in terms of the broader point about costs and predicting the future, yeah, absolutely. I think in the future we will need to budget a lot more for flood defences in the district, especially with climate change and increased rainfall that we've been seeing. So I think yes, we absolutely will, and yeah, I'm sure in next year's budget meeting we'll see an increased number in this column.
Thank you for that. So we'll move on to Appendix 3. Did anyone have anything on Appendix 3? If not, Sorry,
No,
Councillor.
I thought
Yeah.
somebody over there was going to.
Counts. Yeah, okay, so we've got Appendix 4. Appendix 5. Sorry, Councillor, was that an indication to speak? No. Appendix 5. Appendix 6. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, on page 77. Yeah, on page 81. And then we've got Appendix 7 on page 91. And at the end, I will say if there's anything on any of the agenda items that you want to bring back in briefly. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I just want, on page 93, under the transformation, I just wanted to say that I'm very glad to see, and I'm sure Councillor Ellington is too, but I wouldn't speak for her, but to see that at the bottom of the page there is a recognition that we need to carry on supporting mobile warden schemes if we can. I appreciate the narrative looks at it's covering grants for future for the mobile warden schemes across the district, and the increase in budget is to continue the existing service whilst exploring options for the future. And I just wanted to say I'm very glad to see that we're continuing to recognise that that would be a good thing to support if we possibly can. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for that. Did you want to come back on that at all, Councillor Bridget Smith? It's more of a comment.
Well, other than to say, we recognise the value of it. It hasn't necessarily been easy. It's been difficult in some areas to keep up demand. But I'm aware that our colleagues have been doing an awful lot to stimulate demand, because this is what keeps people happy and healthy in their own homes, and the knock-on effect for that of relieving pressure on health services and social services is dramatic. So, yeah, I agree. Thank you for recognising the importance of it.
Okay, Councillor Judith Rippeth.
So slightly sort of adding to what Councillor Bradman said, I think it's important. Often schemes or money comes from elsewhere for startups, for new things, but so essential to recognise the importance of sustaining properly those that already are in existence, because they're working, they're helping, they're reducing costs elsewhere, as has been mentioned in the NHS, for example. And I think that's something we are really proud of, and I feel that we should definitely continue that and support those which are there, and yeah, hopefully others will come about, but we've got some excellent ones already.
Thank you for that. Did you want to comment on that at all, Councillor Smith?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, have we got any other speakers on this item? Councillor Drew.
Yes, thank you. You said a moment ago, Chair, regarding kind of like the overview and the sense from there. And I just wanted really to ask the leader if, looking at the budget as a whole and all the different appendix in the departments and everything that we've gone through there, obviously we've then focused on specific areas and we've gone through appendix this and appendix that. And I just wondered, leader, if there's anything you wanted to say in relation to how you feel as leader of the council about the overall position in relation to these budgets and the overall sense of income and expenditure, because obviously we focused in on bits and that's absolutely great, but I'd be interested to hear if sort of a minute or so on where you generally feel the council is at this point in terms of reserves and expenditure and income and the work that's been done over the last few years. To give us a rounding off, really.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much indeed. So this is a budget for growth. There's lots of evidence there of success and delivery. I really like the fact that we include all the things that have been ticked off. We've taken very sensible decisions over the past 6 years, and we've made very sound investments. And that's why we're now in a position where we can invest in growth and push forward our services and continue to improve. You know, we've heard through the corporate peer review that we have, you know, enviable finances. We are watching, I sit in meetings at the LGA where, you know, we constantly talk about cliff edges for councils which are well managed, councils which are now buckling under the pressure of demand-led services, particularly homelessness for a lot of district councils. You know, we shouldn't, in this day and age, be seeing district councils issuing Section 114 notices, but the sad fact is that we are. So, you know, despite the damage that's been inflicted by government in strangling the finances of local authorities for the past 10 years, we're in a position to put forward a budget where we're making real progress against our priorities, especially when it comes to tackling climate change. You know, we are an exemplar. And as I mentioned earlier, it's one of the reasons why I was able to go and give evidence to a select committee using lots and lots of examples of the stuff that's going on in South Cambridgeshire to a large number of MPs in the room. So as you've seen, we're investing in our waste service. We're tackling fly tipping head on, you know, difficult nut to crack, but we're employing new people to do it. We're giving communities the resources they need to grow sustainably and to bring residents along with them. So, you know, I think I'm very proud of this budget. I thank all our staff for contributing to it, for making it accessible in this way. I thank members for their contributions. So that's my sum up.
Excellent. And just one supplementary in relation to that, because it's just something that I think you perhaps haven't mentioned in that bit there. One of the things that I've heard yourself, leader, and kind of officers refer to is the whole transformation programme. I'm just wondering if there was anything you could reference in terms of the transformation programme, because building on the point that you've made there about the difficult financial situation that many local authorities find themselves in, it is incredibly pleasing for us in South Cambs. We are in a fortunate position, we know that. We are in a position that many other councils perhaps don't find themselves in relation to economic growth. But we also know that you've talked a lot about transformation programmes. So I wonder if there's anything, as my final bit, that you wanted to reference of the successes of the transformation programme and how that has enabled the council to save expenditure, which can only benefit residents as a whole.
Thank you very much indeed. So, you know, transformation isn't a quick win. It's a long-term process that takes years. And you can't transform a whole organisation in one go. So the strategy has been to take service area by service area. So I think you know, you probably know quite a lot about the transformation that's been happening within the planning department, which is, you know, means that, you know, we were, even Michael Gove accepted that we had an outstanding planning department in a recent meeting. Within revenue and benefits, there's been £250,000 worth of savings from transformation. You know, this comes from work streamlining the processes, simple things like automating forms, and has allowed staff to be reallocated in order to work more efficiently. There's been no redundancies associated with this. For most councils, you know, transformation is a scary word because it means significant job losses. But actually what we've done is we've created fewer roles because actually we've streamlined the work and it's much more efficient. And I hope it's more rewarding for staff. You know, we don't want people just pushing paper around. We want people feeling that they're really contributing to the success of this council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So if there's no other speakers on this, we will just refer back to the recommendations. We've considered the draft budget and made some recommendations and questioned it. Is everybody happy that we've done that?
Agreed.
Thank you. So we will now move on to the next agenda item. Which is agenda item 7, the medium-term financial strategy, which is pages 103 to 134. Who would like to start on this? Councillor Bygott.
Thank you. So, my question is about, so Appendix B, there's the table of medium-term financial strategy, and the second line down, retained business rates.
Sorry, Councillor Bygott, what page are you on? It's my fault.
I'm looking online, and there are no page numbers online,
yeah.
I'm afraid. So it's Appendix B.
Yeah.
115, Chair.
Thank you. Carry on, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So in the blue table, financial forecasts, the second line down, retained business rates. In the year 26-27, our income from that halves, and that really is I suppose the main feature really of the accounts, because it means we go from a surplus of about 5 million to a deficit of about 5 million in one go. Now, I asked exactly the same question last year, so I apologise for asking the same question 2 years in a row. But it just seems to me that there's a disconnect between what's in this table and how it's described in the text. So if you have a look at Appendix C, and maybe somebody can give a page number for this, but Appendix C, paragraph 41, business rates reset.
One, two, three.
1, 2, 3, yeah.
Yeah. So it talks about the business rates reset, and in paragraph 44, the end of paragraph 44, it's assuming that the fair funding review may not be implemented until 26-27. So I'm assuming that that major change, the halving in revenue in 26-27, is actually related to this statement about the fair funding review in 26-27. But the text itself talks about an increase in local business share to 75% from 50%, but not a reduction from 50 to 25. So if our income is halving, but yet in the text we're talking about an increase from 50 to 75, I'm just wondering, so Councillor John Williams answered my question on this a year ago. I'm just wondering if we could describe this more clearly in the text, so that the two things seem to go in the same direction. So we're talking about a reduction in the table, but we talk about an increase in the text. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. I will bring in Peter. So it's a good question, and actually you've kind of answered it. You've answered it yourself, really, about the reason for this. You know, with the fair funding review, keeps getting, you know, it's a can that keeps getting kicked down the road, and we are factoring it in, and we are working to kind of, I think, the worst case scenario, aren't we, on this, Peter? So, you know, we're having to guess, and that is what's so frustrating about local government finance and these single-year settlements, that, you know, we are having to make best guesses to the future, and that's why, you know, the LGA constantly lobbies for multi-year settlements, so that we know, you know, so that we can budget properly the way businesses budget. So it's a constant frustration, and you know, regrettably, we're not seeing any progress there. I haven't got Appendix C in front of me immediately, but Peter, I'm sure, can help you with clarification over the text.
Thanks very much. So we'll bring Peter Maddox in.
So I'm happy to clarify the text, but there are sort of two things in operation here. So the fair funding review has been something that's been in the offing for plenty of years now. The planning assumption, and everybody thinks at this moment in time that the fair funding review is going to come in 26, 27. And one of the stated aims of that fair funding review was to move funding to increase funding in social care. So that was when the fair funding review was announced way back in 2018. one of the fundamental aims of it was to improve the funding for social care, which of course is a higher tier authority, something that they do, if you see what I mean. However, in order to achieve that, they're going to move from 50% locally retained business rates to 75%, but that is for the whole local government sector. So the 75%, so there'll be more business rates in the local government sector, but what it doesn't mean is that we're going to get more. It's the idea is that that additional money will be going to upper tier authorities for adult social care, as well as part of the money that we're receiving now will also go into that pot, if you see what I mean. So although locally, within the whole of the local government sector, there is more money available, a lot of it will be going, or that's the intention, a lot of it will be going to things like adult social care, as will some of our current retained business rates. Quite how it works out in the end is still unknown, but that was certainly one of the stated intentions when this was first mooted. But I'm certainly happy to try and make that a little bit clearer, because quite clearly it isn't as clear as it should be.
Councillor Bygott?
Yes, I guess if you could add that sort of point into the text there, because I've picked it up 2 years in a row, and I'm just worried that members of the public may read this, and just because the 50 to 75 or 50 to 25, and the fact that we're halving it, the two numbers are really the same size. If we could have an extra little note there to just say why we've assumed that we're halving it, then I think that would make it a lot clearer for the general public.
So I think that recommendation has been taken on board by Peter Maddox, and I saw Councillor Bridget Smith nodding to sort of bolster that text there.
So thank you.
Yeah, we'll move on. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. So it was just a couple of things that are being removed. I'm looking first at paragraph 13 on page 107. The full regard will be given to is being removed. And then also on page 108, on paragraph 22, when it refers to the performance data will be developed over time, reported. And they just seemed like odd things to be removed. So I'm just wondering if we could understand why those particular points were being removed from the MTFS, please.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Sorry, what was it on page 107 that had been removed? I can see, full regard will be given. Okay.
It just seemed a bit of an odd thing to remove.
I think it's tidying, I mean, that personally I think is tidying up the language on item 13. Can Peter, could that clarify?
I mean, when I was going through this, I did try and tidy the language up a bit where I thought it wasn't clear, but again, I mean, my view might be slightly different than yours. I'm happy to discuss the points in a bit of detail if you feel that the changes perhaps detract from what was originally there.
I think it's tidying up the language, and I think 21 is actually strengthening what it says.
22.
So rather than saying there's need for effective budget monitoring, it says we offer, we operate robust budget monitoring. So I think that's strengthening it.
So I think it's point 22 you were referring to, was it?
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Just make an observation, and that was, I think the reason that the words were taken out in paragraph 13 is because they conflict or are surplus to what is said in the rest of the sentence. The rest of the sentence says, if you imagine it without it, revenue budget forecasts, and any increase in the ongoing annual revenue budget, will be subject to. So the wording at the beginning conflicted grammatically with the wording at the end. So I think there's been, as Peter Maddox has said, he's just tidied up the wording so it makes sense.
Thank you. So if I bring back in Councillor Heather Williams.
Yes, for me, it was on the paragraph 13 about having full regard. It showed intention of what you were going to do, which is why I found it a bit of an odd thing to be removed. But they were just things that looked to me as sort of peculiar to be changing. So, but I've had an answer.
Yeah, thank you. So we have got Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. So we've talked about this shortfall coming up, the budget shortfall, and we've already talked about some actions, and I think implicitly one is increasing the lobbying effort for multi-year settlements, fairer settlements. We haven't spoken much about the investment strategy, but to keep up the investment strategy which has been so successful. Savings, I think, through through the transformation programme and council tax. Isn't that the list of things that we should be working on, the levers that we can pull, if you will, and what should we be doing about it now in order for us to be able to achieve a balanced budget as the business rate recovery or the fair funding review cuts in?
Okay, I'll in the first instance come to Councillor Bridget Smith and then come to Liz Ross, the Chief Executive.
Thank you. So you've identified what we should be doing and actually what we are doing. You know, the proposal is that we, like probably most other councils this coming year, are proposing increasing council tax by the maximum. If we don't, we just play catch up and we never catch up. And there's plenty of councils who are now reaching that cliff edge because they haven't taken the opportunities to maximise their income. And still, even with that, even by levying the maximum council tax increase, you know, we still have less money in real terms to spend because of inflation exceeding it. And some costs are, you know, going through the roof. Still, the cost of steel, I think, is up 30% and so on. So, you know, we're seeing all sorts of increases in our costs. Our investment strategy's been very successful to date, and again, we were complimented in the corporate peer review on our investment strategy. Be it you know, the premises that we've bought, or you know, our continued investment in Ermine Street housing. So I think we have a very good track record, and we now have independently verified report in the corporate peer review that's the case. So I think, you know, what we've been doing has worked, and you know, the plan is to keep on doing more of what we have been doing well.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Chief Executive.
Thank you. I think the only thing I'd add to what Councillor Smith said is that it would be, and I think the peer review report noted this, it would be easy to, I suppose, delay any decisions because they don't affect us until 26, 27. So effectively we're running a surplus for the next 2 years, which is unheard of for most councils. But we absolutely need to keep pressure on here, particularly on the transformation programme, and on other areas of our work. So certainly savings, but also I suppose cost reduction. So looking at where we can change demand, reduce demand, and being, I suppose, more creative with our colleagues about how we look at things completely differently. So, you know, normally in the budget process, you might start in July for the following year. We're already starting now for 26, 27, because the challenge is so enormous. And, you know, it doesn't matter what happens in terms of, you know, I think some colleagues as well, you know, things might be different if there was a different government. Things are not going to be different. You know, the public sector is going to be in a state of crisis financially, and, you know, my view rightly, any extra funds will go to social care because because that's where the huge pressures are. So we do need to work really hard and, you know, soon to address these issues.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stobart.
Through you, Chair, thanks to the Chief Executive and the Leader for their comments.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so we'll go to Councillor Leeming next.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question in relation to paragraphs 31, well, 30, 31, 32. It's on page 109. So this is a text section about reserves. And I wondered whether it would be possible to include a table which showed the earmark reserves and movements within the reserves as part of this document, because it's part of an understanding of what's going on in the full picture. And as a sort of aside to that, I also wondered whether we'd had to create any provisions for anything. Thank you.
Councillor Bridget Smith first.
Thank you. Sorry, could you repeat which page that was on, please?
Yes, of course. It's 109.
109.
So there's text here describing that we do have reserves, and that there are things that are moving in earmark reserves.
Yeah.
But I think it would be really helpful to actually see the breakdown of those earmark reserves and what those movements were in a numerical format.
Okay.
And in addition to that, I wondered whether we'd have to create any provisions.
Fine. So I think we do have that, don't we? May I defer to Peter, please, for where that information sits?
Peter.
Thank you. So there is a separate budget report that looks at our reserves, and it will have some detail around the reserves that we hold. We could probably put a summary table in here as well that would that might assist.
Thank you.
So yeah, and this medium-term financial strategy was the first draft when we started the budget process. We'll be doing a second draft that's an update to this, because obviously we've had the provisional local government settlement now, so there's numbers changed because of that. We've set our council tax base, so there's a number of there will be a number of changes to the strategy as it is now as a result of the budget process. So when we update that, we can include a table like that, and say there's another report with a bit more detail on our reserves as well that will be coming forward.
Councillor Leeming.
So this budget paper, is this the one which is going to council? This financial MTFS statement, is this?
So this will go through the budget.
When will the changes take place, and when will the updates be made?
Yeah. So we're at the process of bringing together the overall general fund budget. So we haven't got all the numbers yet, but over the next few weeks we will have those numbers. So at that point we will be updating the MTFS, and obviously that will inform some of the figures going forward as well. So, and that'll be part of the budget papers that come to Cabinet on the 6th of February and the Council on the 27th of February.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Did you want to come back on that at all, Councillor Leeming?
Just trying to understand that the papers that go to Cabinet will be the most up to date with.
That's right. Yeah, that's my understanding.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And on your point about the summary and having the table, I think that's been taken on board as a recommendation from the.
It's just part of the overall picture. I think it's a sort of like the bit of the boat that sails under the ship. It'd be really helpful to see. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, I don't think I answered the second part of your question. So there's not any new provisions proposed. We have sort of the biggest provision we have is in relation to business rates appeals. So that's by far the most substantial provision we have, but there's no new provisions proposed at this stage.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Drew.
Thank you, Councillor Coe. I'm referencing really to point 12, which is on page 107 of the report, which the one that starts, the clear message is that the budget setting and medium-term financial planning will be tough over the duration of the MTFS. And then it lists a series of bullet points which clearly will inform the overall practice that's going on. There's been a number of points made, starting with Councillor Bycott's point and then other people's points as well in relation to the forthcoming fair funding review. And I know that we talk about, and I think Councillor Smith referred to, kicking the can down the road, and is it 26, 27, or is it late or whatever? But I think as the Chief Executive just referred to there, it is coming, and we can only expect it to be the case that the funding situation for us as District Council becomes more and more complicated as time goes on. So what I really want to do is explore a bit more in relation to that for the medium-term financial strategy. So my first question really, and I know it kind of comes out within the papers and in the budget and such like, but I'd like to hear the leader in particular's view on this. How would you summarise the position of the council financially in terms of surplus or deficit at this point in time and over the next couple of years, in terms of the income we have, the expenditure we're making? Would it be fair to say that the council at this point in time is in a surplus position, and that as we move towards the possible 26-27 fair funding review coming in, if it wasn't the case of the fair funding review, we would be able to say that the council was in a healthy financial position? Is that a fair summation of where we are?
Councillor Smith.
Thank you. So this council is in a healthy financial position, made quite clear in the corporate peer review. Enviable was the word. So we've already heard from the Chief Executive that we continue to be in surplus for the next 2 years. You know, what we want to do is to, through the transformation work we're doing, through, you know, continuing to invest to save, you know, the hope is that we never get to the point where we're running a deficit and we're having to do what so many other councils are having to do now, which is eat into their reserves. And the problem with eating into your reserves is once they're gone, they're gone. And, you know, we hear the government saying, you know, reserves are for a rainy day and it's rainy now. But, you know, there might be a tornado to come and it might be raining a whole lot worse, you know, in 5 years' time. So, you know, good financial management involves maintaining your reserves or even adding to your reserves. So, you know, by not being complacent about the task in hand to identify a couple of £1 million worth of additional savings, you know, we anticipate avoiding that cliff edge. But as the Chief Executive has said, it ain't going to be easy. You know, this is hard, and hard decisions have to be made. But through transformation, as I've already given an example, you know, that can be a positive that leads to you know, better working, more effective jobs, slicker management. You know, but it's not that many years ago when there was multiple Excel data sheets floating around this organisation, you know, with stuff being, you know, not being digitised that should have been digitised. So it's been a rapid improvement programme over the last few years, but our aim is to, you know, maintain the financial health and robustness in the longer term.
Thank you. If I can follow up on that then. So if we take it that, you know, it's your view as the leader of the council that we are in a robust, healthy position at this point in time, that we are running surpluses. I believe that the intended surplus for 24-25 is over £4 million. So therefore we are looking at a really positive picture. But we do, as you've referred to there in terms of cliff edge, we do have the fair funding review coming along. So although you referred earlier to the kicking the can down the road, if you can humour me in the sense of, let's assume that 26-27, regardless of government, regardless of general election, does become the point at which the fair funding review takes place. What position do you think the District Council will be in at that point to deal with the fact that we will be losing somewhere in the region of £5 to £6 million of our income? And from what you've just said there, you would hope that it doesn't lead to any reduction in service. But I know we are moving perhaps ahead of our medium-term financial strategy, but I still think that is predicting forward what we're doing. What is your expectation of the position the council will be in at that point when the cliff edge does appear? And is it your hope that we will continue to be able to offer the services that we do currently offer, even with that dramatic reduction in income?
So in a word, yes. So, you know, a lot of councils are in the position now where they are only delivering their statutory services. Some are having to reduce their statutory services. So, you know, and that's a problem because, you know, you've got to do that stuff and they're not. So, you know, we are in the enviable state of doing ever such a lot of discretionary stuff. Some of it little diddy stuff like 6 free trees, the nice to have. Some of it, you know, much more expensive like the mobile warden schemes. We don't have to do these things. We choose to do them because we know that's what makes South Cambridgeshire a really good place to live. So to me, having to start cutting that stuff is a sign of failure, and I don't like failing. So, you know, we are working towards being able to, as a minimum, maintain the offer we currently make to our residents. And, you know, if we keep on, you know, if we do really well on the transformation work, and we know we've got outstanding, we have the best officers in the UK delivering this stuff for us. So, you know, it won't be for lack of trying, it won't be for lack of ability or lack of commitment to this. Hopefully nobody, you know, falls over from exhaustion in the process. So my anticipation is that we will cope with it, but it's going to be difficult.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you. I suppose in a sense I will almost reference what Councillor Bygott did at the start of his point, where he said this is a question I asked last year and Councillor Williams answered it. I look forward in 12 months' time to, in a sense, kind of coming back to the question I've asked tonight, because obviously we will then be 12 months closer. We will have had whatever political landscape we may well be in at that point, we may well have more sense. So really, I suppose, Councillor Smith, I look forward to coming back in 12 months and perhaps asking the same question again when we'll have moved 12 months further forward. And perhaps Councillor Bygott will be answering his question again, but we hope not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Do we have any other speakers on this item? Can't see any. In which case we will move to page 101, where the recommendation is. I think we have asked questions, provided scrutiny, and made some recommendations throughout that discussion. So when the report comes, those recommendations can be taken into account. Is everybody agreed on that?
Agreed.
Lovely. Okay. So we will now move on to the next agenda item. Sorry, does anyone wish to have a break at this point?
5 minutes to go to the toilet.
5-minute
Please,
break?
could I ask for that?
We will have a 5-minute adjournment.
Really, I asked myself there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we will start from agenda item 8, Ermine Street Housing, pages 135 to 142. Have I got any speakers on this item? Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to expand, please, on the paragraph 3A. So that talks about Ermine Street Housing borrowing additional money from the council of up to 20 million. But I wanted to know where the council would get that money from. So is it Public Work Loans Board? Where is that? Where does the 20 million come from as far as the council is concerned, please?
Thank you very much. Did you want me to come to you in the first instance, Bridget, or yeah?
So to the best of my understanding, it is predominantly Public Works Loan Board, though there is some homelessness grant, I think, as part of that. But if I could ask Peter for confirmation.
Peter?
Yeah, so when we borrow, we look at how long we need to borrow the money for and where the best rate is. It might be Public Works Loan Board, it might be another source, but we'll obviously assess that when it gets nearer the time, but we will need to borrow some money to fund the bit that's not funded by grant.
Councillor Leeming.
Thank you. And what proportion of this 20 million will be funded by grants and what proportion will be funded by loan?
Peter Maddock.
Well, it says in the report, I'm not sure. Does it make it clear in the report what the split is?
So it's, we had a certain amount that was homelessness grant, didn't we? I'm just trying to find out where that was. It wasn't an insignificant amount. Peter Canberra, I wonder if he might have that information at his fingertips.
Yeah, sorry, the information's not in the report, but we're looking at about £500,000 of homelessness grants. So to make it clear, this isn't this year's homelessness grant. This is stuff that we've accumulated over previous years.
Councillor Leeming.
Thank you. So there's £500,000 worth of homelessness grants and 19.5 million of loan. That's correct? Thank you.
Councillor Leeming, is it my understanding that you think it should be in the report, this information?
Yes,
are you making a recommendation it should be?
Or transparent in the report, where the income is coming from, which proportions to do with grants and which proportions to do with loans. Thank you.
And on your point around the loan, would you like that to be stated in the report?
Yes, I think it would be helpful to say who the loan is with or who it's likely to be with as well. I think that would be helpful.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So just to clarify what Peter had said, a final decision will be taken on the source of the loan at the time it is taken, because, I think, it's often the case that Public Works Loan Board is the most desirable, but not necessarily. So obviously we will be looking at all options.
Agreed. Would it be better to document that in the report, is what I'm saying?
Happy to do so.
Yeah. So I think that recommendation has been taken on board.
Thank you, everybody, for replies. And thank you, Chair.
Councillor Drew.
Yeah, just something specifically in relation to that. Would it be correct to say that, obviously, sorry, let me start there again. Obviously, I know that this is coming to us, a scrutiny overview, to go through us, and then a final decision is at full council. That's correct, yeah. Would it be correct then to say that the administration, the officers, will be asking both us a scrutiny overview and then the full council to give them the authority to decide where the loan comes from? Without it coming back again to full council?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So I think that's normally a delegated decision to the responsible cabinet member.
Okay. Nothing to add on that. Okay. Just to be clear, I'm going to have a quite significant number of questions in relation to this. And I'm going to have a number of questions in relation to this because I think this is about more than simply Ermine Street housing. I consider this to be about the wider issue of council loans, council borrowing, and the issue of arm's length organisations. But I will come back to some of those more questions in a minute. But I just want to pursue this one first of all. In the past, there has been issues in relation to council borrowing and where the borrowing has come from. And obviously the Public Works Loan Board is something that can feel a complete sense of safety and security in that regard. I wonder if it is possible at this point to share where the other possible sources of finance may well come from, because I'd be interested to know that before we simply move on from the item. If the statement was that it was just going to be the Public Works Loan Board, then from that regard, I would feel quite comfortable with that. But I wonder if it's possible at this point in time to share with the committee what other alternative sources of finance the council may well consider.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
I think the answer is probably no. Not because I don't want to share the information, because I think it's probably because we don't know. Not Iceland, okay. But I don't know whether Peter Maddox can
even just
be more specific.
Principle of where the other places might be.
Peter?
Peter?
So the Treasury Management Strategy, which is part of the budget process, is the overarching document that deals with our borrowings and investments. And within there, we potentially could, as we've said, borrow from the Public Works Loan Board. We do borrow from other local authorities, potentially banks, building societies. The rates tend to vary, and in the past, the Public Works Loan Board hasn't been the cheapest. As it happens, it's very competitive at the moment, and again, I think we will revisit that at the point in time when we need to borrow. I think it's likely to be the Public Works Loan Board, if I'm honest, at the moment.
Okay. I suppose the reason I'm kind of throwing this up is because, and I should be clear that I'm not in any way suggesting whatsoever that South Cambridgeshire District Council is in any way in the same position as other local authorities such as Thurrock and Woking have ended up in. However, if you read reports and you read papers and you investigate the issues that councils have ended up in, the issue of borrowing from other councils and the issue of borrowing from private banks does come up much more often in relation to issues of where councils have ended up in problems than borrowing from the Public Works Loans Board. And I accept completely that it is not possible to explain in detail exactly where the other alternative sources of finances are. But I am very keen to perhaps make the point that it does concern me that in an environment in which councils have ended up in significant problems related to loans that they have taken out in order to then lend money or provide money, whatever, to other entities such as Ermine Street Housing, that you then also read about the fact that council scrutiny committees or whole council meetings were left in a position where at a later date it was clear that they had not examined in every single possible detail in a way that might actually be quite irritating to those involved in doing it and asking endless questions, that becomes part of the issue. So I'm immensely keen that in relation to this extremely large amount of money, that every possible detail is given. So I wonder whether or not it is possible for either the Chief Executive or the leader to make a commitment that, considering the very large amount of money that's involved, that further information will be provided before that loan is taken out, even if within the Constitution it's a delegated decision of the Cabinet member.
I'll come to Councillor Bridget Smith first, then Liz Watts, the Chief Executive.
So, Councillor Drew, this council is run extremely well. We have a very robust Treasury management strategy, as Mr. Maddox has just articulated. We have considerable oversight. The councils you're referencing are councils where there were rogue individuals in senior positions without the level of transparency or oversight that this council runs. I'll bring Mr. Maddox at this point.
I'll bring in the Chief Exec first and then Peter Maddox.
Thank you. I just wanted to jump in here. I think there's two issues. One is the paper you have in front of you tonight, which is about lending 20 million to Street Housing. And the other is, how do we borrow? Now, that's a really important point, Councillor Drew. And the Treasury Management Strategy will go to Cabinet on the 6th of February, and then it will come to full council. And we would welcome your scrutiny at full council of that Treasury Management Strategy, because it's a document that us finance people often feel doesn't get a fair kind of, a fair amount of scrutiny. I mean, for example, it's not coming here tonight because you had lots of other things that I think were really substantive that you wanted to scrutinise, but you will get an opportunity at full council. There's a full list of counterparties, i.e. the people that we borrow from, and it's an extensive document that sets out how we borrow. So welcome the point and welcome your scrutiny when we come to council.
Okay, thank you.
Shall I just come over? Did you want to add to that at all, Peter Maddox? No, thank you. Councillor Drew?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Peter Campbell, did you want to
Just make
briefly add something there?
Yeah, another point in response to that, and also in response to Councillor Leaman, is that if members agree this loan to Emin Street, it doesn't mean that that will be a drawdown of £20 million as one loan. It may be a series of loans that are drawn over a period of time. And following the process that Peter Maddox explained earlier, it may well that if we're seeking the best offer at that time, it may well that we end up with a portfolio of loans from different sources rather than just one from one individual's place.
Okay, thank you. But the paper we have in front of us doesn't say that. The paper we have in front of us refers to a £20 million loan. I totally accept what you've just said there. It's a very good explanation of where we are, but the paper says a £20 million loan, and I think it's entirely reasonable for councillors to therefore assume it is a single loan. But I thank you for your correction. Perhaps the paper should be rewritten to reflect the fact that it is a £20 million overall loan, which we made up of a series of loans.
Okay, I'm just going to bring Councillor Leaming in on this point as well.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Campbell. It's actually a really helpful point, because if it's broken up into increments, that automatically reduces the risk. We can make decisions for smaller amounts as each bit comes along, if that makes sense. And presumably it would give the opportunity to review the entirety of the process. If it's not 20 million in one go in one big project. If we're breaking it up and doing it phased over time, that gives us a chance to make decisions at various points along the way. Am I correct in assuming that? Yeah, thank you. It reduces the risk, and it would be really helpful to have that documented in here. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. I will now bring in Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. So this is partly about financial strategy, but it's also touching on, and please advise me, Chair, on our homelessness policy. Doesn't it make the council more responsive to trends in homelessness and actually make it, in a sense, easier and more financially viable to accommodate homeless people? So there's that as the essential background, but as I understand, from the previous discussion, the risk level appears to be relatively low. So as it's described, I think in the page 139, the list of risks, which are actually internal risks. There are risks about how the process is managed. We acquire properties in a sensible way and so on. And Peter Campbell has described the series of loans that might be covering clusters of properties, but it would be done property by property. But I was just wondering if there are bigger, outside risks, and one might be, for example, a change in the housing market, which changes the valuation of the portfolio, of accumulating a number of single-person properties, which then create a bit of a maintenance headache, which was maybe more than anticipated. Just wondering what those external risks might be, and whether the plan is, can successfully mitigate. Yeah.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So I'll have a stab at this, and then I'll ask Duncan to fill in any bits that I've missed out. So the current portfolio was bought at a value of 96 million. It's currently valued at 116 million. So I mean, it would have to be a heck of a housing crash to make much impact on that. We've commissioned an independent report from Savills, and it predicts that Ermine Street will be debt-free in 50 years' time. So then it's a massive capital asset at that point. So, you know, one of the reasons for increasing the size of the portfolio is that some opportunities have come about to purchase housing that's kind of too good to miss. So there's some very attractive opportunities out there at the moment. Additionally, you know, this is moving Ermine Street, which when we took over control of the council in 2018, Ermine Street was solely about revenue generation, and it was buying homes in Nottingham, as far as I can remember, you know, quite far afield. So we changed the business case for it in order to make it focus on the travel to work area around South Cambridgeshire, because we felt investing South Cambridgeshire money needed to deliver benefits to South Cambridgeshire. So since 2018, we've seen ever-increasing problems in the private rental market in lack of supply, and we know it's critical. And places like London, it's absolutely critical. So all the evidence is that as house prices go down, so rents go up, and that's what we're seeing currently. Certainly the case in Cambridge, definitely the case in London, because as more people move into the rental market, so you know the demand goes up and prices go up. So you know it's a pretty robust business case. So that business case is presented annually from Ermine Street. Company accounts are submitted to the council and to Companies House annually. There's an external and an internal audit annually. And as you know, we have councillors on the board of directors. So, you know, there's a tremendous amount of oversight here. Should there be some catastrophe, which we do not anticipate, the responsibility for the debt rests solely with Ermine Street. It does not rest with this council. So the liability is on the company. It's not on South Cambridgeshire. So I think moving into provision of homelessness accommodation, and we're talking here about single occupancy units, I think is a really positive step, because the most difficult people for us to help tend to be single men, and often single middle-aged men, where there's been multiple breakdowns in employment, domestic arrangements, and so on. And it's very true. And I've had people turn up on my doorstep and they're in floods of tears, and I have to tell them, you know, they're not our priority. So, you know, this gives us an opportunity to start addressing problems that are getting worse on a daily basis here. So I think it's a real positive, and the fact that we're able to pull in some unspent homelessness grant to help us do that, you know, must be good news, you know, for the whole everyone in this council. If there's anything I've missed, can I ask Duncan to fill in the gaps?
I think that was a pretty full answer, but just very briefly, Duncan. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the only thing possibly the question you talked about the long-term maintenance and possibilities of issues with that. Well, we don't buy properties unless we have a full property survey done on them, so provided they are in good condition. I don't know whether you were talking about specifically the homeless type properties, but they will be managed by Shire Homes on behalf of Ermine Street, so there will be intensive management, and some of the smaller scale repairs will be borne by Shire Homes, and they'll be visiting and looking after the property anyway, so I don't think that the long-term maintenance will be a problem. That allays your fears on that one.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stobart, did you want to come back on that at all? Yeah, just Councillor Stobart first and then I'll come back.
Chair, the answers are great, so thank you.
Yeah, I think it was pretty full. Is there anything very briefly you want to add to that?
Very, very, very briefly, and to address your concerns, we'll make sure that the issues on the RIS are entered on the corporate risk register as well, so they are monitored.
Thank you for that. I will move on. Yeah. If we come to Councillor van der Weyer next, and then I'll come to Councillor Heather Williams and then Councillor Drew.
Yes, I can't say I've kept track of the Public Works Loan Board criteria over the last couple of years, but they certainly were tightened up in relation to commercial investments. And I was wondering whether a borrowing of the nature being discussed, sort of how that fits, how confident we are that that fits the criteria for the Public Works Loan Board. Mentioned briefly the Treasury strategy coming to Cabinet and Council. I mean, from my point of view, the main, the important factor for making a decision about this investment in Ermine Street, which does sound attractive, is how it fits in more with the investment strategy that we have and the balance of that. And that I realise that this paper is from the point of view of Ermine Street, but from the point of view of the council, it's how it fits in with the investment strategy. I think usually we have it at the same time as everything else in the sort of budget cycle, but it'd be sort of useful to think about it when that comes to us.
If I come to Councillor Bridget Smith in the first instance, and then maybe Peter Maddock will pick up. Yeah, Peter Maddock.
So as regards the rules around the Public Works Loan Board, so they were changed back in probably November 2020 now, I forgot when it was. What we do know about that is that we're not allowed to borrow from the Public Works Loan Board if we're then going to invest in a property purely for yield. And when we've explored that, we've got a bit more detail behind that. So something like housing, for example, is something they're prepared to lend for, so that there wouldn't be an issue with borrowing from them for this purpose.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on that at all, Councillor van der Weyer? Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. I think that was one of the questions I had, because my concern when I read through the documents, and that's not sort of discussing the merits of the idea of loaning more to Ermine Street would determine that at council, was that there is definitely a yield part of it, and then we've got the homelessness, and whether sort of tagging that together demonstrated more than just a yield return. I appreciate it as housing, but it's not affordable housing, although Ermine Street may decide to alter their rents or what have you, but it is essentially a commercial practice. So I think the report could do with a bit more reference to that. Obviously, it sounds like you're confident it complies, but I think the document itself would benefit from that. Going on to something that Councillor Drew raised around the sort of wording, I think it's quite right. It does say up to 20 million, and then that might be a phasing, but as councillors we have to accept the principle of £20 million going to Ermine Street. Normally, we have the strategies in place because quite often these are like commercially sensitive things, and we have to make quick decisions because you might lose the opportunity. However, here, Ermine Street is something that is solely within the control of the council, and I just wanted to have clarified that, because the leader said about sort of the debts and what have you being responsible of Ermine Street, but of course it would impact, given the council is the sole owner of Ermine Street, if they can't repay us the loan. So just think we ought to be clear of the risk that, in response to Councillor Stobart's, that there is still risk attached. We might make a decision as council that we accept the risk, but it's not just the liabilities on them, because obviously we would lose out on the repayment. I think in the report, be interested if the leader would commit to just showing the decision-making process, almost like a flow chart. I am wrapping up, because I think that would help be really clear as to how this decision is going to be made, council onwards, cabinet, because it just refers to cabinet. And given that it's solely within the control of the council, surely there would be an opportunity before the money was borrowed to come back to scrutiny. Scrutiny isn't a decision-making body, so cabinet could then, or the lead member could then still make the decision under the delegation. But as Councillor Drew, rightly referenced other issues where it's gone wrong, I don't think it's unreasonable for scrutiny to want to see that again.
Thank you for that. I'll come to Councillor Bridget Smith in the first instance.
So I will think about it, but as things stand at the moment, I don't see the value of scrutiny looking again at the detail of where a loan's coming from. These are commercial decisions. We have, we have a strategy to manage it, but I'm happy to discuss that further with officers.
Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. That was part of it. The other bit was about whether there could be some inclusion about the PWLB and how it complies, just to strengthen and robust the report, and a clear decision-making process, just for members of the public as well to see where it's going to flow from.
Yes, to detail about the compliance with the Public Works Loan Board. I mean, I thought it was clear in the paper what the decision-making was, but we'll review that and see if we can improve on it.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Drew, please.
Thank you, Councillor Carey. Assuming there was a total of £20 million, and obviously as Councillor Leeming established with her questions earlier, it's £19.5 million loan and the £500,000 housing grant. Should something happen to Ermine Street housing, and should something go wrong, because property, unfortunately, we do end up in a situation, despite the general healthiness of the property market and the success that people make, there are occasions when, unfortunately, property developers or buyers or renters or whatever do go wrong. Should that happen in this regard, the £500,000 homelessness grant that has then been transferred to Ermine Street housing, what is the status of that grant in terms of, has it been handed over to Ermine Street and been given to the Ermine Street company for them to do something with it? Or should it be the case that Ermine Street was to go bankrupt? Would that £500,000 homelessness grant be something that the council could call in as a debt?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
I'm going to, I know I didn't know the answer to that. I'm going to have to come back to Duncan, because I can't recall what the answer to that was.
Duncan?
No, he's going to.
I'll pick it up. So what will happen is that there'll be an equity share of the properties that are bought with the assistance of the grant. So the council will maintain a share of each individual property. So we're satisfied that the payments of the grant to Ermine Street in this way meets the requirements of the homelessness prevention funding. But the other thing to bear in mind is that each property that we look at through Ermine Street, and will continue with this scheme, is done with an individual viability is carried out using a net present value calculation. That takes no account of the increase in value of that property over time. So even if the values of the properties were to fall, as long as the rental income continues to be the same, the Ermine Street will earn enough money in order to repay the debt. So as Duncan pointed out earlier, to date, there's been about a £20 million increase in the value of Ermine Street properties. So they have got, considerable. If they were, obviously the only way to realise that money is to sell all the properties, but there is a significant amount of equity that remains within Ermine Street.
Okay, I think I understand. If I can just then add further to that, obviously the council is taking out the loan value at some point up to the £19.5 million and is then loaning that onto Ermine Street. So again, I'm going to ask the negative question in that regard, because for these things I'm always interested in what the worst case scenario could be, and I think that's the right thing to do in terms of protecting what is taxpayers and residents' money. If Ermine Street was to go bankrupt, how would the council get its £19.5 million loan back? I don't, it's fine.
Well, I mean, I thought I'd explained that the responsibility for the debt rested solely with the company.
Well, yes, but we've taken, the council has taken the £19.5 million loan out. Therefore, I know we've talked about different things. Let's assume we take it all from the Public Works Loan Board. The Public Works Loan Board are going to expect us to repay the £19.5 million plus interest. We are relying upon Ermine Street continuing to make sufficient income to be paying us the loan back. So therefore, as I always think you should do in any business situation, worst case scenario, should Ermine Street go bankrupt, we are still responsible for a £19.5 million loan that we have taken out as the council. How do we go about getting our £19.5 million back from a bankrupt property company? I'm sure there's an answer to this.
So the same way that anybody does, by selling off the capital assets and making a claim on the capital assets. But I'm going outside my comfort zone here, so I'm going to go to people who have looked at this in detail.
So that's right. So we've already covered that the value of the assets from Ermine Street has increased since the point of purchase. So that there is an increase, there is an equity left in Ermine Street. So if they were to sell the stock, it's worth more than the overall value of all the loans onto the council, and the value of the equity is greater than the value of this investment fund that we're setting up. So if we set up the investment fund and we lent all of it to Ermine Street at the same time, there is still currently enough equity within Ermine Street to pay to repay everything, and they're continually monitored, and that's reported back regularly to members, and of course the councillor representatives on Ermine Street board monitor the business plan as part of their duties. So the council has fairly clear oversight of Ermine Street, and of course the council is the sole shareholder of Ermine Street. So the risk for this activity is relatively small.
Duncan?
Yeah, thanks. Also, I think it's worth pointing out, as Peter alluded to, that the business plan is refreshed annually and presented to the board, and the projections are over 50 years, and the independent survey from Savills said that within 50 years, Ermine Street would be in a position, based on the current state of the business plan, to repay all the debt, and the council would gain that interest over that period, and it would be sitting on a huge portfolio asset. In 2020, that was estimated at £107 million. So I'm just saying there is a cushion there, and as the business plan is refreshed annually and also presented to council, the council will be in a position to note, will Ermine Street still be in a position to repay that debt after 50 years? If something goes wrong in 1 year, like we have a huge number of roof failures, for example, in year 30, which is anticipated and it could happen, quite right, that's why we've had a stock condition survey done. It could well be that some years it might be difficult, and it might show that in the business plan we won't repay that debt, and there might be a small amount outstanding in 50 years of £1 million or so. But and the projection so far is that that debt will be cleared.
Okay. And if I just finish with one more thing in that regard. Within the report that's presented, and as Councillor Smith and others referred to, obviously Ermine Street is a fully owned company by the District Council. And we refer to the board members and such like, but there is a section in the in the report that refers to obviously the acceptance of the loan and the acceptance of any decision obviously is down to the board of Ermine Street to decide. What is the process should there be a disagreement in terms of strategy for the use of this public money, whereby it has been transferred to Ermine Street, and the Ermine Street board were to decide that they wish to pursue a different approach, and the council disagreed with that approach? I ask this question because, again, the council is talking about giving £19.5 million of public money to what is, to all intents and purposes, a private company. What is the process should that private company seek to pursue a different approach to that which the council wishes it to?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. I'm going to refer back, but to say that, you know, it's quite clear what the purpose of borrowing this money is. It will be set out in an agreement, I'm sure. So, you know, it's just not possible as far as my understanding is. But I ask for confirmation from behind me, please.
Yeah, so over the past 9 years, Ermine Street has borrowed £100 million off of the council, and the board has known what those loans are for, and that's to purchase homes to make a rate of return for the council. So I don't think there'd be any difference in the additional £20 million and how the company spends that, as borrowing the £100 million previously. But I take your point. You know, what are the checks and balances? Well, there are 6 directors on the Ermine Street board, 2 of which are executive directors, Peter Campbell and Jeff Bembry, 2 councillors, who are your councillors, and there's 2 other non-executive councillors. So, I mean, so the majority would be on the favour of the council if the company decided they wanted to do something different to what the council expected to do.
Okay, thank you.
And
thank you to everyone who has answered my extensive and long-ranging questions. As I said at the start, I consider this issue to be incredibly important, and I am completely unwilling to simply pursue the £20 million or £19.5 million loan taken out without feeling that we have asked the questions to the nth degree in every single possible way, and I feel this is the role of the Scrutiny Overview Committee, and I would be disappointed in myself if I had not pursued it to that extent. I believe the work that Ermine Street does is profoundly brilliant. I think that Ermine Street is a fantastic company that does amazing work. I think that the council deciding to borrow £19.5 million and lend it to Ermine Street is a great decision for the council to take. I thoroughly support the decision that's been taken. And when it comes to full council, I'll be clear now, I will absolutely support it. And I believe, as Councillor Smith has made clear, the work of Ermine Street is really good and we should be very proud of it. But at the same time, I believe this is the role of the Scrutiny Overview Committee. So thank you for all of your answers and for bearing with me. Thank you very much.
Okay. Do we have any other speakers on this item?
No, one more
yeah.
final point. Just to be absolutely clear, is that although that we've used the words loan quite a lot within this discussion, it's clear from the paper that what we're talking about is an investment fund, and that's the reason why we may make that may be made up from a series of borrowings. So the loan in this paper is really the loan from the Ermine Street gets from the council. The council's commitment is to set up an investment fund.
Thank you. So I don't think we've got any other speakers on this issue. I can't see anyone indicating to speak. So if we go to the recommendation on page 133, I think we have asked questions and scrutinised the documents and gone over the points that it indicates in those recommendations. So is everybody happy that we have done that?
Agreed.
Agreed. Lovely, thank you. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the work programme. So you'll see that we have outlined what is coming up in future meetings. Councillor Leeming brought up a good point to me in the week to say that there are some months where there isn't anything allocated. There will be. We're keeping them clear at the minute so we can prioritise items that are coming up. So that is sort of intentional, but you are right to point that out. We will be populating and filling those agendas. Did anybody have any questions on the work programme? Okay, in that case, sorry, Councillor Bradman.
I just wanted to point out for Councillor Ellington's reassurance that the Lifeline service is coming up in the March Cabinet meeting. So you probably saw that on page 147. So obviously that will be considered then.
Thank you for highlighting that, Councillor Bradman. If we've not got anything else, we will close the meeting there. Lovely, thank you. We'll come off the live stream.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.